Yeah, I'll see how we
Yeah,
can
just
see you.
give it a minute, yeah. But by God, I'm telling you, Lex, I was doing just an episode of Visage earlier, and there's a bit in the video where I literally shriek, like
Nice.
literally shriek.
What
It's
type of game is it? Is it like a
it's
walking about discovery type game or?
yeah. Did you ever see or play PT?
No, I've seen it, but I didn't have a PS4
It
until like
is
beginning of last year.
essentially what they've done is they realized that PT, despite just being essentially a trailer, was one of the scariest things ever made for video games, right?
Yeah,
So they've taken that format and they've extended it into a full game. So
right.
you're in a house and it's first person, and there's something about the house looks, when you first start, looks really normal, like aggressively normal, but there's something about the dimensions of it that are just very subtly, like, so you can't even tell what they are, just slightly
Right, yeah.
off. And it makes you feel, whenever you're wandering around, despite it being a very confined space, you get lost all the time. You don't know where you are. It feels tense and anxious. Somebody in the comment section said, watching you play this excites my social anxiety. It feels like I can feel like genuine anxiety welling up as you're playing it. And yeah,
Nice.
that's exactly what it's like. It's horrible. It's sincerely horrible to play, but I mean, as horror games go, obviously brilliant. I mean, that's kind of what you want, isn't it? But it has this weird effect of making me not, like, reluctant to play
Yeah,
it.
I know what you
It's
mean. Where yeah, it makes you reluctant to go in the next room or open a door or
right.
anything like that.
It
Yeah,
also has this randomized element. So you have like a sanity. It's all based on sanity. You've got like a sanity meter, and your sanity goes down as you experience certain things. So if the lights go out, if you stand in the dark for too long, if you hear certain things, if you see certain things. But there's a random element involved whereby things can happen just out of the blue without any provocation or anything that you've actually done.
yes,
So the lights will go out, like the circuit breaker will go, and suddenly you're in the dark. And suddenly your
yeah.
sanity's going down, and you're seeing things, you're hearing things, the house is creaking, you hear footsteps and voices, you'll see shapes just go across oh God, it's so
Is that a
scary.
download game
It
then?
is, yeah, yeah. It's quite expensive actually for an independent game, but given the amount of work that's gone into it, I can see why.
How much is it?
It's about 30 quid, I think.
That's not bad though, is it?
It's
If
all
it's a
right.
good quality. I mean, you're right. It's quite expensive for
An
a
indie
non-disc,
project,
non. Yeah, but
but no, it's really good. I mean, it's definitely if you're going for the pure experience of horror in a horror game, it's probably
yeah,
one of the best I've played, to be honest, because it's just so horrible. It does this weird thing whereby the horror isn't like normal video game horror. It's not like japesy and funny, where
yes,
where it makes you go, oh, then you laugh. It
yeah.
feels horrible. It actually, the person who said that it excites their social anxiety is right. It feels like real fear.
Yeah,
And I mean, the way it works is it's separated into chapters. So you activate certain chapters by picking up these certain key items, and then
I
once you
see.
pick them up, the chapter starts, and then you have to wander around the house doing certain things, finding out about whatever character the item relates to. And I'm doing this chapter about a woman named Dolores at the moment, and Dolores apparently was one of somebody who owned the house a long time ago, and the what's unfolding at the moment, it's very well told, so it's kind of obscure. You have to put a lot together yourself, but the story that's unfolding is of a woman who had some sort of degenerative disease and slowly went mad over time. And as it's progressing, she's turning up. I'm starting to see her at the ends of corridors,
Okay,
and
right, yeah.
like, what made me shriek this time round, I was in this area that's like a study upstairs, and I was just coming out of the study, and when you're not sure you've seen something,
Yes,
it was
yeah.
that. And what it was, you could just see her peering round the corner, and then she disappears. She slides back round again. I went, just shrieked. It just did for me. It was
Anything where you
so
don't quite see it is always worse than just a
right,
full-on thing
right.
that's there. Yeah.
It's scary as hell. It really is nasty, this game. It's a nasty piece of work.
Yeah, I probably will get it. I probably will get it. I'm just working through the Mega Drive stuff at the
I
moment.
saw, I saw you're playing Ghouls and Ghosts, aren't you?
Oh God, it's awful. I forgot how hard it was.
You know what? I saw you play. I saw you say you were playing it, and I was like, you know what? I've beaten Bloodborne. I've beaten Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3. I've never even come close to beating
It's
Ghouls
so
and Ghosts.
difficult. You don't even. There's things that happen which seem like a deliberate
Yeah,
fuck you.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you'll be halfway through a jump and an enemy will drop down on you.
yeah. Or appear
So you just
underneath.
fall.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it's
yeah.
like there is no way to not die on that.
Well, I mean, you know why it's like that? Originally, it's a coin-op game. It's an arcade game.
Yeah, so it's
So
designed to sink your money into because
exactly,
yeah,
exactly that. Do you know what happens when you complete it?
no,
Have you not read? Do you want me to tell you, or do you want to
no,
find out?
leave it because I want to
You want to
see.
find out? Okay,
I want to
okay,
try
but
and get. I'm doing all right. I'm on
yeah,
about a third level, but it's taken. I suspect that like if I didn't die,
hmm
I could probably finish the entire game in about 45 minutes.
right,
It's that
yeah,
sort of a game, isn't it? You know?
yeah. I mean, it's like it's one of those games where you get into a rhythm, and if you get into a rhythm, usually if you can maintain it, you're all right. But it is a fuck you game. It is. It's one of
Yeah,
the.
it
It
is.
must have been one of
Yeah.
the first games that were like that. You know, where
Yeah, it
it's
is. It really is. Yeah, it feels like it's designed that you get 5 minutes into it and die, and then
yes,
your next scroll you'll get 6 minutes and then die, and then the
yep,
next scroll you'll get 7 minutes and die, and it's like that is the whole.
hmm
It's designed that way because there is stuff that the first time it appears. There's no way you're going to anticipate
no,
that and you're going to die
you are
straight
just
away.
going
The
to
only way
die.
you're going to
Yeah.
get past it is that after you've died once, you know it's coming.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, it's an evil son of a bitch. The
It's
game isn't.
awful.
It's evil. It's evil, and it gets worse, as it
Yeah, it
goes
does.
on.
Yeah.
There's a
I
lot of
think
like,
Rebecca's just messaged me to say she might have sorted a problem
oh,
out.
cool, excellent, okie dokes.
Are you there, Rebecca?
You there, Rebecca? Oh,
No, still not got nothing.
still no, still not hearing anything. Oh no. This, I mean, as I said, we do like, my Warhammer 40,000 podcast,
Yes.
the Fluff and Hammer. We have guests on quite often, and this is often a thing. It's very often it's Skype that's being a pain in the arse.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
It's very
it's
often Skype. But yeah, I remember like there was a holiday I had when I was a kid, and the hotel had a coin-op arcade cabinet of Ghouls and Ghosts. I must have spent a lot of money, like a lot of my holiday money playing that. And I remember there was a level I could get to where you've got to drop down. The whole level is you dropping down, but a lot
right.
of it is blind jumps.
So
And
yeah,
there's
yeah,
like there's like you're dropping down like a tunnel or like a hole, like an abyss, and there are spikes everywhere, and there are enemies on. It's just
you just get a little bit
atrocious.
further each time, and you have to memorize
Right.
when to move left or right,
That
or
is exactly it. It's a
yeah,
memorization game, isn't it? Because like the enemies just crop up out of nowhere. A lot of the time, things that seem completely innocent will drop you into a pit, or they'll fall or they'll crumble. Have you ever played the Super Nintendo version?
that's even harder for some
Yeah,
reason.
Super Ghouls
I
and
don't know why, but
Ghosts.
it is.
Super
Yeah.
Ghouls and Ghosts is it's like a step up, isn't it? It's even worse. It's even nastier than the
I
normal Ghouls and
noticed that
Ghosts.
because I played that on my on the Super Nintendo Classic system. I tried that,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
could barely get past the second level on that.
Is that the one with, I don't know whether it is, but there's a level on that where it's like a water-based level, and there's like this mechanic whereby the waves will sweep forward at random intervals and wash over the screen, and you need to be standing in
Oh, there's waves. Yes,
exactly the
that's
right
right.
place.
Yes, yeah,
You need to be in exactly the right place, or it just ain't gonna work.
yeah, that's on there. But I
Oh,
remember, yeah, I could. I don't think I even got past the second level on that.
yeah.
Whereas on this one, it's different, completely different levels as well.
Yeah,
They
oh yeah,
barely look
yeah.
alike.
They retooled it for Super Ghouls and Ghosts. The bosses, the levels. There are more like power-ups and things in Super Ghouls and Ghosts as well. There's a lot more you can actually do as Arthur.
Yeah.
It's a totally different beastie, you know?
It is. As I said, I couldn't get past the second level on that, but on the Mega Drive one, I'm up to about the third or fourth, and I am having to keep doing it over and over. But it is possible to do. So I
Yeah.
did notice, even though it's still really hard, it
Yes.
is a lot easier than the Super Nintendo one.
Oh
It
God,
does
yeah.
actually feel as if I stick at it, I will be
You
able to get
could
through this
do
one.
it like
Whereas
incrementally, yeah.
the SNES one, I felt like I could spend years on this and
Yeah.
not get through it.
Have we got? Is Rebbie back?
I'll just have to try rebooting because that
That's
sometimes
that's a good
when I've had
idea.
Can you
issues.
hear me now?
Oh
Aha!
yes.
Yes, that sounds good.
Good, because I was about to throw the damn thing out the window.
Oh, excellent! Yes, brilliant. Oh, I'm so glad we got you. Yeah, I don't honestly don't worry about it. We, as I said before, it's often the case. It's often the case. I mean, I do a regular. I was just saying to Lex, I do a regular podcast with a friend of mine about Warhammer and all that kind of thing, and it's like every week, and it's only the two of us usually. We do have guests on occasionally, but every week we have this. You know, it's Skype is just it can be a right pain as a platform.
Yeah, undoubtedly
It
so.
really
Yeah.
can. It really can. But Remy, hi. Thanks for coming on, by the way.
Yes, thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. You know, when Lex told me what you wanted to talk about earlier, I was like, oh wow. I had this strange wave of bizarre nostalgia because it's like the Child's Play films. Oh, those are artifacts of childhood for me. I don't know about you guys. When did you first come across them?
Well, they're actually one of my favourite films because I actually first came across them a hell of a lot younger than I ever realised I did.
Right.
Basically, when I was really little, my cousins are a lot older than me, so they used to come and babysit for me.
Right. Okay.
And I got up one night and went down to see my cousin who was watching the film. And
Ah.
all I remembered about this film that had then subsequently stopped me sleeping for my entire childhood was that this doll wanted to play and then people went away. And that was the only thing that I remembered about it. So when I watched the Child's Play films, I totally didn't even put two and two together that they were the same thing.
Right.
Because that was the only thing I remembered about it, so I'd convinced myself that it was something else entirely.
Right. So you had this. Oh, that's really interesting. So you had like this strange, almost oblique reaction to it.
Yeah. So because I hadn't seen much of it, it was just obviously whatever was happening on the screen at that point must have traumatized me.
Brilliance.
But yeah, so I actually came upon the Child's Play films and decided they were a favourite without ever knowing that was that film. It was only when I said to him, I want to watch that film you were watching. This is when it was. What was it? That he said, oh, it's Child's Play films, don't watch them, the shit.
Well, you know, I mean, they're a weird artifact, the Child's Play films, aren't they? They're a very, very odd phenomenon. I mean, I remember when they first came out. I was a kid when they first came out, so I watched them really, really young. But I remember like we rented it. We rented it from the local showing age here, so apologies audience, real apologies, but like from the local video rental store, VHS.
What was it? What was your video rental shop
Well,
called?
it wasn't. It was like it was a little independent one. Like it wasn't one of the big chains or anything. It was
No,
one of
ours was too. We had one which was there was like a northern chain of like a mini video, and it was called Ritz.
Right.
And you used to see them like in northern places, so like Sheffield, Manchester, Liverpool, that sort of place had them. And then eventually it got taken over by Blockbuster. But for the entirety of my childhood until I was about 14, it was Ritz, and that was our video rental place.
Right. Well, ours was like there's a like a local corner shop, and it used to be the case that the second floor, the upper story, was converted into this Aladdin's cave of VHS ephemera. It was
Nice.
incredible. You'd go up the stairs, and it'd be like dark lit, it'd be like black lit, and there was this like purple velvet everywhere over everything, so it had this real like dark forbidden feeling about it. And
Yeah.
one of my beloved memories is me, my mom, and my brother going there like every weekend, renting out horror films because we used to love horror films as kids, and just devouring them over the course of the weekend. And one
Sure.
of them was that. Do you remember the old VHS of Child's Play? That had it was like back in the day when the VHS covers had artwork on them rather than stills from the film.
No, I don't think
You
I've
don't
ever
remember?
seen that.
It's really cool. It's there's nothing to do with the doll on the front, nothing at all, because of course that would ruin the surprise. It would
Yeah.
ruin the twist, yeah. So it's just like the apartment that Andy and his mother have that's on the corner of that building. There's like a tower
Mm.
that their apartment is in. It's a view from the street of that with the
Oh, a bit
smashed
like an
window.
Exorcist sort of thing.
Yeah, very like that with the smashed window. And you've got like, for some reason, it's not even Andy's eyes. You'd have thought it would be Andy's eyes. You've got Andy's mother's eyes painted in the sky, sort of looking down in horror
Right.
at it. It's a really weird, abstract cover. But of course, what people forget about the original Child's Play is that it is a sincere horror film.
Well, this is the thing. Like, I didn't watch any of the Child's Play films at all until about 5 years ago
Uh-huh.
because
Right, so you never saw them as like a kid or
no,
anything?
no,
Oh, wow.
because uh, most of my access to horror films as a kid came through either I had a friend who was slightly older than me, and he had. It's one of those things where, as a kid, it's like on Simpsons with Bart's friends with Nelson, and
Yes.
Nelson's mum and dad don't give a shit what Nelson does, so he gets
Right.
away with everything. And Bart thinks that's awesome, but as an adult, you look at it and think, no, it isn't.
No, it's not. All of us
You know,
have that friend, don't we?
I had that friend as a kid,
yeah.
and through him I saw a lot of horror films, but also my granddad used to show me horror films as well.
Of course, yeah.
Because he was really into them. Funnily enough, it meant when Rebecca mentioned that having a scene in mind that she didn't know what it was attached to, I always had that through this film. Is that I remember vaguely seeing part of a film at his house where someone was getting chased through a boiler room when it turned out it was Friday the 13th. But at the time,
Right.
I always remember this scene of somebody getting chased through this like red lit boiler room, but I didn't know what that was from.
I love those memories. Don't you know the ones
Yeah,
where
when you're not quite sure what they're attached to, and then you finally see it, and it's barely like how you remember
yes,
it.
of course, you've like embellished it and you've turned it into something. Did that happen to you, Rebbie? Did you like, but you know the image that was in your mind, was it slightly different from the reality of the film?
Oh, totally different.
Yeah.
I had it as one of them dolls, like a baby doll, you know, when you lay them down
Yeah.
and the eyes closed.
Oh, right.
It was a completely different premise and everything that I thought.
Yeah, you piece it together from different stuff, probably.
Yeah.
Which is probably why I never figured it out when I watched the film.
Of course.
I never sat there and thought, well, this looks familiar. But yeah, so I think most of my thing of being a horror fan probably came from little bits of trauma like that, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
I never really had horror films and things growing up because none of my family are really into them. My mum's absolutely terrified. She thinks Buffy the Vampire Slayer is a horror film. So I watched The Crow at a friend's house when we weren't supposed to because we were too young for it. And then I watched The Ring again at a sleepover.
God, that's a leap. The Ring is the original Japanese one or the American one?
No, it was the American one.
Either
I didn't see
way.
the Japanese one until a few years later, and I'm glad I didn't.
Right. Either way, that is a terrifying film.
Yeah, it is.
You know?
Yeah, The Crow has the one of the best soundtracks. I must just say.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
The music that is on from The Cure when Eric first smashes a mirror and puts his makeup on and stuff, that was my gothing up music when I was going out places as a teenager. It's the best music to put eyeliner onto.
I'm going to call the episode that. The best music to put eyeliner onto.
That's a good compilation, isn't it? Music's important. You'd have the Cure, you'd have a bit of Morrissey.
But my God, Rebbie, The Ring, I mean, if you're not used to horror, for that to be one that you watched as a kid,
yeah,
Jesus.
it's a big start.
That is like deep end stuff.
That was probably my first proper horror film, to be honest. I think I was about 12. And the funniest thing was, I watched it at this sleepover and I was completely fine, absolutely fine. It was the next night when I was at home.
On your own?
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I had in my room was a black bunk bed. You know those metal ones with the little sofa underneath?
Yeah.
I had one of those, and on the opposite wall, I had this cabinet full of porcelain dolls.
Oh God!
Which, when you've watched a horror film, really doesn't help. But it was glass fronted, so I laid there at night, and I looked, and the bottom sheet, as is quite usual for kids' bedding, was white. And I'm looking in this glass in the front of this cabinet, and all I can see is the black bars and the white. And as soon as I saw that, my brain just went, Samara's in your room.
Yeah, Samara, yeah, of course.
I screamed the house down. My mum wasn't impressed.
I'll bet any money, God. I mean, I was quite lucky in that regard, because my mum is a horror fan. She's like uber #1 horror fan. So my brother and I kind of grew up with it. You know, we've got, like, I mean, I must have discussed this with you before, Lex, but we've got sentimental attachments to horror films, you know?
Yes.
In the same way we've got sentimental attachments to, like, kids' franchises, you know? And Child's Play is definitely one of them. I really remember seeing that film for the first time, because I think that may have been... We rented it from the local VHS store, which was awesome, and... I think it may have been my introduction. We were way too young. I mean, like, ridiculously, stupidly young to be watching it. But it may have been my introduction to the whole subgenre of, like, the haunted / possessed doll, which is everywhere now. I mean, it is like an established subgenre of horror, isn't it? You know.
Well, what I was going to say is that the reason I never watched that one is because, as a kid, and only saw it recently, is because this friend through whom I watched all these franchises and stuff didn't like the concept of a haunted doll thing. He thought it was stupid. So he never watched it. And so I never did either. And again, my granddad wouldn't have been asked about that either. Yeah. So the vehicles through which I would have seen this didn't have those films. But then when I got to the age where I was picking films myself, like from the video store and stuff,
of course, yeah.
The problem I had was that I'd already watched multiple sort of 80s, 90s horror franchises, which started off really well and then became like parodies and comedies of themselves.
So degenerated, which was almost de rigueur, wasn't it?
Friday the 13th, Halloween,
Nightmare on Elm Street, Hellraiser,
everything I'd heard about the Chucky films said that they were the same. So I never had any particular desire to go and watch them. And even as an adult now, I've only seen the first two.
Yeah,
and the remake they did recently, because I was at cinema for that. But I've never watched any of the rest. I do intend to, but until recently, they weren't even on Netflix or anything, so I wasn't going to pay for them.
They're unusual films. I mean, the first three are pretty sincere horror films. They definitely have moments of comedy in them, because you can't really get away.
Even the first one does. Yeah.
Even the first one does, because you can't really get away with the premise without it being a little bit funny.
No, you can't.
It is a little bit silly, isn't it? I mean, like it's one of the things I noticed when I love the original Child's Play. I really like it. I think it's a really good film. But what I do notice about it is when it's revealed that it's the bloody doll that's killing everyone, why don't they just punt the little bastard?
Do you know what? That is my point, is that it isn't scary how difficult it is. The fear of Chucky is the fact that, as with a lot of haunted doll things, you don't know what's causing it.
Right.
If you do know, other people won't believe you.
Yes.
That's the fear of it. But as soon as it's confirmed that, it is this 2-foot tall plastic thing, how hard is that to chuck it in the river, or to run over it, or to put it in oven? It's really not difficult, is it?
It's like less scary than most of like your serial killer slasher films, isn't it? Because at least like in a serial killer slasher film, it's like a big person. It's someone who's strong and, you know, can actually pose a threat. It's a friggin' doll. You know, when it, you know, there's the brilliant, and I love the sequence. I think it's great. You know, when the first film plays it dead straight. For the after the introduction sequence, which is the only one where you get to see Brad Dourif in the flesh, you know, when he's playing Charles Lee Ray. After that, the film plays it completely straight for the longest time, and it's like a really slow build, isn't it? It's a slow burn.
It's ages before you actually see Chucky walking about with a knife or anything like that. Yeah.
What I love about the first film, and I think this is why it's so successful, it has this wonderful ambiguity. You know, barring the first scene where you actually do see Charles Lee Ray doing his whole like witchcraft thing and putting his soul in the doll, you could believe that Andy is.
Did you know that was the original premise? You were never going to see the doll move originally. Right. It was going to be a very M.R. James style story where you get to the end with a question mark, as in, did Andy just do all this shit,
that would have been much scarier.
That was the original idea.
Actually, that would have worked really well. It would have. I can see kind of why they didn't do it, because it would be too redolent of a few other films like Magic, for example.
You also wouldn't get the franchise out of it.
No, that's true.
But I think the argument was that one of the alternatives that was sort of like a midway between that idea and what we got was that Andy was doing it unintentionally.
Yeah.
As like a psychic power that he couldn't control. Right. So like all this frustration and rage at being bullied and stuff was making this doll animate and go after people that were hassling him, but he wasn't consciously aware that he was doing that. That was going to be one idea as well.
I kind of love that. I think that would have been much more interesting, and maybe...
That would have been interesting, but again, it's a one and done thing. Yeah. You wouldn't have got like 8 films and toys and, you know...
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, you can actually buy the good guy doll now, can't you?
Yeah.
You can actually in the proper size.
Oh yeah, in the packaging and everything, you can actually get the good guy doll. It wouldn't surprise me if you like, because the film really successfully draws that like the good guy franchise is massive, doesn't it?
It's like, huge. It's like we talked about toy franchises on last podcast, didn't we? It's meant to be like one of them, isn't it? The thing that people are fighting in shops over.
Yeah, literally. I mean, you actually see that in the film, don't you? Because like Andy's mum wants one, doesn't she? Because Andy wants one so desperately.
I got Rebecca a Chucky toy for Christmas because she never. I knew that it's her favourite thing, but she didn't have one, so I got a little one, and he's in the good guys box and everything.
Brilliant!
He is, and he's got like different heads that you can change and all weapons and stuff like that with him as well.
So you can do all like the scarification and whatnot that he gets. I mean, one of the things I do love about the film is how impressive the actual animation is. It does look really good. You know, the puppetry and everything is fantastic.
The fact that it's a bit janky works for it.
Yeah, it does.
Because you don't want it to be too smooth.
No.
Because it's not meant to look like a little midget running about. It's meant to look like a puppet.
Yeah,
so...
if it were CG or something, it probably wouldn't work as well. You know, if it were a more present-day film. I mean, did you guys see the remake?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you know... It's
she's not a fan.
Yeah, it's not.
I hated it.
Oh, you hated it. Okay, I didn't hate it, but
I did a blog post about how much I hated
it. But it's like it's not going to resurrect the franchise. Let's put it that way. It's not.
It's to me. It's like I kind of liked it, but I don't have that attachment to the original series as we've established. So it's just, the idea is it's a murderous little doll. The only difference to me without the emotional attachment to those films is that in this new one, the reason is that it's a cybernetic Wi-Fi thing rather than some guy who does a voodoo ritual, which seems insanely easy to do, to be honest. You just shout something and hold your hand up and that's it, you're immortal. So
actually, that's a fair point. I didn't notice as a kid, because you just don't, do you? But like the whole like witchcraft voodoo angle is really weird, isn't it?
It's insanely simple, isn't it? That's all you have to do. No one else knows about this, but all you've got to do is hold someone and say, "Give me the power, I beg of you," and that's it.
Right,
That's...
and it doesn't even have to be a person, technically.
No,
It could just be like,
no.
I mean, it
I'm
does.
winning this Dyson. Yeah.
Doesn't it like bring up lots of metaphysical quandaries? Like, if he could do it with a good guy doll, couldn't you technically do it with like an Action Man or something?
Does it have to be humanoid? So, like, could you do it in a toy car? Or...
Put yourself in a toaster.
Yeah.
Oh
Maybe that's
my
what
God.
Toy Story is. Maybe it's all people who've done this.
I mean, there's a way they could take the franchise. Maybe, for all we know, like, in this universe, there could be, like, entire households that are populated by possessed artifacts, you know.
Something I do find interesting as a franchise of it, and tying on to that is to the fact that you can do it again, is something I'm aware of but know nothing about, so I was relying on you to explain to me, is how you end up with Tiffany. So is she the same? Is she someone who does that ritual, or what's that about?
The other doll.
Yeah, Tiffany is... she's, you know, the character played by Jennifer Tilly.
Mm-hmm.
Is she in the first one? I've only seen the first two.
Yeah, I think Jennifer Tilly's in all of them. I think she only becomes Tiffany in the later films, though.
Right.
But basically, she is Brad Dourif's girlfriend.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And she's supposed to be helping him get out of the doll, but half the fun of the Chucky films is trying to see him get out of the doll, to be honest.
Yeah.
If you get past the fact he put himself in the doll in the first place, it's just so hilarious because he's constantly trying to get out of this doll.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work.
Really doesn't.
I forget why she ends up being a doll.
I can't.
Well,
you know
he's dying, isn't he? He's dying, and the only thing that's anywhere near him is that doll.
He's
so
shot,
he
isn't he,
does
by
it
the
out
cop?
of desperation.
Yeah, he's shot by the cop, isn't he, in the first scene of the original film?
I never understood why his obsession with this kid. Could he do it in anybody, or is it
there's a rule.
Once you've picked someone?
No, there's a rule regarding the magic. It's got to be the first person that he reveals himself to.
I was going to say, I knew there'd be some reason for it, because otherwise you just find someone easier, wouldn't you?
But there are qualifiers introduced in the later films. Like in the first film, the doll is like completely destroyed at the end. There's hardly anything left of it. It's burned, its head has come off, it's dismembered, it's just like there's nothing left of it. But the way they get around that in the next film is the doll is, for whatever reason, pulped and like sifted and introduced into the good guy manufacturing line, so all the blood and the essence of Charles Lee Ray goes into it. So he's basically reborn in another version of himself. And after that, once that's done, it's like a rebirth. So he can technically introduce himself to someone new, and then be reborn he can possess someone else rather than Andy.
Right.
So that's
but he still goes after him because it's like a vendetta at that point.
In the second film, he doesn't really have much choice. He's still going after Andy in that one. It's the third film where he finally does reveal himself to someone else first. And so it's and Andy's like half grown up at that point. He's a teenager.
I was going to say, I thought there was like quite a realistic passage of time in them.
Yeah. Andy's he's in a military academy or school or something like that in the third film.
So Tiffany is someone who already knew Charles Ray, what's his name then, and then she does the same thing for some reason.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, I've remembered what it is now. So basically, she is his girlfriend from before he went to prison. Mm-hmm. Then she finds out that he's got stuck in this doll. It's in the fourth film, Bride of Chucky. And basically, she thought he had proposed to her, because before he went to prison, he gave her a diamond ring, but it wasn't. It was something that he wanted to look after that he'd stolen. So to make fun of him, she gives him the talking doll in a wedding dress because he's stuck in this doll. And then she puts him in a playpen, and she's just like proper taking the piss.
As you would.
She goes for a bath, and he murders her in the bath by electrocuting her. At which point she ends up in the doll.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So basically, because she took the piss, he put her in a doll.
Yeah,
Okay,
that makes
as you
sense.
do.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
It does get a bit stupid.
Well, the whole tone of the films changes with the fourth one, doesn't it? I mean, like the first three
Yeah.
they're still trying very much to be like horror films with slight comedy moments, but still very much horror films. Whereas the fourth one, it changes the franchise completely, really, and becomes more like the latter Evil Dead films. You know, it's like a sort of
Yeah.
slapstick horror comedy with gore moments and gross out moments.
Tiffany becomes like a proper like. I rarely see Chucky merchandise without Tiffany there as well.
Oh no,
Even
she's
though
well
I know that she
beloved.
comes in quite the latest stages, but that's kind of funny how things happen like that. Because like with if you say Jason Voorhees,
Yep.
Friday the 13th, you immediately picture the guy in the gas mask, the guy in the hockey mask, hunting teens around the summer camp, right? That combination of things doesn't actually happen until about the fourth film.
It's the fourth film, yeah. That's when he gets the hockey
doesn't
mask.
have.
Yeah.
He's not in the first film,
Nope.
and he don't get the hockey mask until the third one, and he's not at a summer camp until the fourth one. So it's actually quite a while until the classic trope that you think of becomes what Friday the 13th is, and yet now you kind of retroactively think of that. And I think Tiffany's kind of one of them in that whenever you think of Chucky, you think of Tiffany as well, but actually she comes in quite late, doesn't she?
It's absolutely true. You can't really predict what the audience are going to latch onto, like what image they're going to go for. I mean, a really classic example of that would be the Cenobites from Hellraiser. If you watch the original Hellraiser, they are in 3 scenes. They're in 3 scenes maximum, and even in them, they're not in them very much. They are not like the focus of the story. They're not.
It's Uncle Frank, isn't it?
It's Frank and
he's the monster, if you like.
Yeah, it's Frank and Julia who are the principal antagonists of this film, and really the story focuses around them. And
the Cenobites are almost like the de facto good guys in that they turn up and solve the problem
in a strange, weird, peculiar. In the first film, yes, they're really ambiguous, aren't they? They're really ambiguous. Apparently, according to Clive Barker's commentary on the original DVD, he was saying like the idea they had for like the franchise going forward initially was they wanted to bring Julia back as the recurring monster or the recurring villain.
Right.
And they wanted they were sick to death of seeing the male-dominated like horror franchise monster. They wanted like a really credible female equivalent. And that's what they wanted to do. But audiences didn't latch on to Julia.
No.
They latched onto the guy with pins in his head. They latched onto the Cenobites. So that's obviously what the franchise became later on.
Okay, and it's interesting.
In its own peculiar way, the Chucky franchise, this is they're not called the Chucky films, they're called Child's Play. But if you go up to people, even people who were around at the time, who remember the films, they're like, "Do you remember Child's Play?" They're sort of like, "Not really." With the doll with Chucky. Oh, Chucky, yeah, I remember that.
It's the title. That's a good point.
Yeah,
I don't think it's got the association. Like you say Halloween, you think Mike Myers. You say Nightmare on Elm Street, you think Freddy. You don't necessarily think Child's Play.
No.
And then immediately think. In fact, in my head, just like Rebecca was talking about confusing films when she was little, for a long time, I thought Child's Play was that 90s comedy with that kid that were a pain in the ass.
Oh, Problem Child.
Problem
Child, yeah.
Yeah, because I thought the Chucky films were just called Chucky.
Yep. Most people do. Most people do. There's still quite a proportion of people out there who are even kids in the 80s and the 90s who don't realize they were called Child's Play. And I imagine that's because as the series has progressed, a lot of the themes that the original film sets up, because the original film has a lot going for it. There's actually a lot of clever stuff in it. There's a lot of stuff about being a single mum in that era. There's a lot of stuff about the relationship between parents and children who are maybe a little disturbed, who have trauma in their background and not being believed.
That's the important aspect of it. Yeah.
All of that stuff is really interesting. All of that stuff is really fascinating. Children's relationship to their toys is even brought up. There's a kind of materialist thing that you could certainly quandary. But all that kind of goes away as the franchise goes on. It does just become the Chucky franchise,
Yeah, they bring Chucky very, very much into the forefront of it, but I think the reason why people remember it as the Chucky films is because as you go on, he gets put in the title.
Yeah.
So like you've got
Yes.
Child's Play 1, 2, and 3, but then you've got Bride of Chucky and Seed of Chucky, and you know, and I think that's why people think of them as the Chucky films, because they're thinking of the later films.
Yeah, I think so too. And he does become the protagonist, doesn't he? Like he's the main character in those later films. All the plot revolves around him. It's not like in the first three films. It's always a human character in a very sort of human setting, and then Chucky intercedes. He turns up and starts wreaking havoc.
That was a weird 80s thing, wasn't it? Where the monster became the star.
Yeah.
So, like, Friday the 13th, what are the name of the campers? Does anyone know?
No.
Do you know what I mean?
I couldn't name a single one.
That's my point. It's like the monster became the protagonist, if you like. So you take that monster and stick him with any random group of people that he's going to kill. Now he's in a different city. Now he's in space. Now he's whatever, and it doesn't matter because it's him that you're watching for.
Yeah, it's absolutely true.
Well, and they've done that very much with the titles of those films as well, because again, they're not Friday 13th anymore. They're Jason Goes to Manhattan.
Right.
Jason Does to Hell, Jason X, Jason versus Freddy. Yeah.
Well, again, it's like it's what audiences respond to, isn't it? Especially like from that era, there was the whole phenomena of horror films not just being horror films but becoming franchises. So there was like a marketable character, to the point whereby like towards the earlier mid 90s, they were actively trying to cultivate those franchises.
Yeah.
To the point whereby you ultimately get Scream, which is like the ultimate parody of that whole phenomena.
Yeah.
Which is again another one of my absolute favourite franchises. I've got to say, Scream is so bloody
Scream,
clever.
but I think there's no need for any more. Although you can say that about a lot of franchises, to be honest.
Yeah,
but
it's true.
The first one's great, but then there's no need for it. Given the whole point of that film to then become a franchise itself, it's like how. Like it's almost like, well, it is capitalism, and it's like how capitalism infects everything. So like you can now buy merchandise that tells you it's the small things in life that don't cost very much that are important.
Right.
And yet there's a range of merchandise that says this on it, which you have to buy.
It's beyond parody, isn't it? It's beyond parody. Like the whole thing about Scream is that it is directly parodying these kinds of franchises, the very phenomena of them, and then
then it becomes one.
But bizarrely continues to comment on the phenomena. So like the second Scream film is about the number 2 films in horror franchises.
Yeah.
And the third Scream film is about what happens when you eventually reach the third, and so on and so forth. And they're okay, they're pretty good, they're fun. I like I think the parodies and the insights that they introduce are really sharp for the most part. They do know their onions. The first one is the best though. The first one is so good. I find that people approach the Scream films in different ways. People who like and know horror see them as comedies. They see them as parodies.
Yeah.
People who don't see them as horror films.
That Scream was, when I was that age, my sister is about 3 years older than me. So quite often she would be having like girls around for, film nights and stuff when I was little. And Scream was that kind of film, and indeed one of those films that group of girls would watch because to them that was a horror film.
That was a horror film.
Whereas to someone like me, even younger than them as I was, that was a comedy film.
Yeah.
And it was that type of a thing. But I do think what's quite interesting is how, as these franchises go on, they, including the Chucky ones, the way you watch them, the purpose you watch them for sort of changes.
Definitely.
So like if you're watching the first Halloween film or the first Friday the 13th or the first Nightmare on Elm Street, you're watching that as a legitimate lights off horror film. By the time you're watching part 8 of these, it's kind of like a popcorn let's laugh at it film.
Yeah, definitely.
Is that the same with the Chucky films, or do they actually stay good even though they're different? No, okay.
No, I mean, yeah, Rebbie's got it. I mean, they are fun. I mean, even
the one where they have a kid and all. What's that?
Yeah,
How does that
Seed
work?
of Chucky.
Seed of Chucky, yeah.
How does that work?
That's a doll as well.
Yeah.
No, but do they literally have a baby that dies and goes into the doll, or
almost,
is it dolls?
you almost
No.
don't want to know, you know.
They've just lost it by the time they get to see the
Yeah.
Right. So is that
to
thing
be honest,
born as a doll then?
yeah,
How does that work?
it's really emo as well. It's like really like you could imagine it being played by Johnny Depp. You know when you watch the animated ones by Tim Burton and he's got the obvious Johnny Depp character, like it's like that.
Am I right? It's Billy Boyd, isn't it, from the Lord of the Rings franchise, who plays
Yes, it is.
You know.
Yeah, it is.
So funny, so funny.
But I've only ever seen pictures of that. I just know that there is. Yeah.
By that point, they've almost completely abandoned the horror.
They are doing a series of it, which I talked to Rebecca about a while ago, and it sounds all right, actually.
That's interesting. They're actually doing like a TV series of Child's Play.
It sounds like, as per the Halloween films and stuff, they're basically ignoring everything after the second one.
Yeah. Okay.
So the idea is, but it's in real time. So like now, 30 years later, somebody finds this knackered old doll at a dump.
Oh dear.
And takes it home, and that sort of reinvigorates it. But beyond that, I don't know what the premise is. But that idea that, okay, forget everything after the second film.
That's probably a good idea.
Tiffany, forget the kid, forget all of that.
Yeah.
It happened when it happened in like 1987, and then 30 years later, this is, you know, so that's the premise of it, and I think that might be all right.
That might work, yeah. I mean, the thing with the
a series though, not a film. I don't know if you can stretch it out to 10 hours worth of material.
I'm not sure, but like the Child's Play franchise does have stuff to explore. I mean, there's the whole voodoo stuff. There's the
why this even works is quite interesting.
Right, and who is
is there a price for that? Does he have to? You know, who's giving him that power and for what benefit?
You find out who taught him in the first film. There is a guy he goes to visit who's like, you know, the whole 1980s horror, the horror trope of having like the person who's of some kind of ethnic background, who's like a shaman or a witch doctor.
Magical foreign person.
Exactly, the magical foreign person, which Stephen King does all the time, by the way.
He does.
It's that. It's essentially that. There is this black guy who is like a shaman or a witch doctor who actually Chucky goes to see at some point, and he's the one who taught him how to do it. You don't know why, you don't know like what their relationship was, but that's kind of interesting, isn't it? So like maybe they could explore that. Who was Charles Lee Ray?
Yeah.
How did like this guy who seems to be just like a hood, you know, he's not even like he's not even like a big time criminal. He just seems to be like a psychopath, you know, like a monster basically.
He does, yeah.
How did
I've got a deliberate subversion of the magical foreigner in my Harkins book. I don't know if you've got that far yet, George.
Oh,
I know
yes.
You've been reading
yes, I have been reading it.
A character of Wong. Have you met him yet?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Rebecca's read this book as well, so she knows what it is about. Yeah. So it's set in Victorian times, and this guy is a deliberate, at first impression, like stereotype of the old Chinese man running the curiosity shop sort of thing. Except he puts that on for customers, because what he really is a proper old school Cockney con man sort of person. Who just puts that on for customers, but he's nothing like that really. And that was a deliberate kind of, I want the audience to read that and think, oh fucking hell, this idea again. And then 2 pages later they're like, oh no, hang on, he's just got one over me as well.
Well, I must admit, when I first came across it, I was one of my notes was gonna be, might want to change that, Lex, you know. But then I read on, I was like, right, okay, fine, because it's a trope. If you watch horror from the 1980s, if you read horror from the 1980s, it's gonna come up. It's just always, bloody always. It's the magic foreign person, you know. It's just like or the person with an ethnic background who just knows what's going on. You can reel them off. Poltergeist 2, The Shining, The Stand. It's just like, oh my god. I mean, Poltergeist 2. I still have a lot of affection for that film. As like sequels go to popular horror films, I've got a lot of affection for that film. But when the like Native American guy turns up and he's like the very stereotype of what you'd expect, you know, it's sort of like, oh my god, this is painful.
I can't remember much about the Poltergeist films after the first one, but doesn't the second and third one completely change the origin of what happened in the first one?
Pretty much,
like
yeah.
The first one is a Native American burial ground, but then doesn't he say later on that actually it wasn't? It's pilgrims or
that's
something?
right. It's pilgrims. Yeah, it's this cult led by the Reverend Cain, you know, the antagonist of the.
That's him. I could picture the guy with the hat on.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, his screen presence is unbelievable.
Oh, he's great, but it just kind of it should have been a separate film because it kind of undermines what the.
And it probably
was.
I mean, let's face it. You know, Poltergeist was such a popular film that you can definitely see like studio execs like rifling through their mails. What have we got? What can we make into a Poltergeist film next? Because people love this. Let's make another one.
Yeah.
It's probably that. It's almost certainly that, as most of them were.
That's the thing. As inspired by that, one of the films that I always used to see in a video shop, and I want to know which both of you guys used to see as well, a film I always remember seeing in video rental shops was that House film with the hand on the front.
Which was great artwork. It had great artwork on the cover.
Did you ever have one of them, like a horror film that you always remember seeing in those shops, video shops?
I can think of a few, actually. I can think of quite a few.
Not really for me, to be honest, but I didn't really grow up with anybody who wanted to watch them.
Oh God, yeah. Oh, are we like being the old men here? I
remember video rental shops. Ours was called Choices.
Oh, that was yours. That sounds like a Lifetime film about something. Choices.
No,
it was great. We used to go up to Choices and then we'd go back down past the chip shop because there was this one specific chip shop that did round fish cakes and I was obsessed with them. But yeah, it was Choices, and then that also turned into a blockbuster like everything else.
Yeah. I think they bought out a lot of UK chains, you know, because there was another video shop near us, which wasn't the one we went to, but I remember seeing it, and that became a blockbuster around the same time as the one that was Ritz.
Yeah.
So I think they just bought out like every UK chain.
Oh, it's such a shame, though, isn't it? I mean, I know the one we had. I don't even think it had a name, you know. It was just the video rental store that was in the local shop, you know.
So what was the one that you saw then, Rebecca? The film, the horror film that you remember seeing a lot, the video artwork. Did you have one, or was it just a lot?
I had a horror one that I used to see because nobody around me wanted to watch them. So it was very much like the one film that I would always see every time you walked in was American Pie.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Of course, and that must have been at the time we're just on the edge when like the VHS rental stores were just starting to fail.
Did I remember us getting DVD rentals in at the tail end of the life, but it was just like a couple of things that had come out on DVD, not like everything that was on video was also on DVD. You know, it was just But I love that when there's video artwork that you can remember, and for me, that hand from House, or like you said, the artwork for the original Child's Play film, that is very firmly in my mind of seeing it on that shelf every time.
Yeah, they're burned into my mind. I can remember the one from the cover of The Lost Boys, you know, that had David's face with like there was like I don't know why there was like a wisp of flame coming up from his forehead for some bizarre reason.
I've not seen that one.
Yeah,
the only
really
one I've seen Lost Boys is with the Lost Boys at the top, like Kiefer Sutherland and all that kind of thing.
Right. And there was the Critters. I always remember the Critters one, which was just,
of course,
you know, a big picture of the critter. Again, artwork, you know, it's a painted thing. That was really common on VHS box art back then.
It used to catch your eye more, didn't it? And then the 90s sort of started this era more of just having a photograph of the star.
Unfortunately so. I mean, there was one I remember really well because we rented it a couple of times, and it scared my brother, but it never scared me, and I went back to watch it again recently, and it's just shit. It's just terrible. This film called Don't Panic.
I've heard of that.
It's sort of like a very low rent, and when I say low rent, I mean like it would probably be the kind of thing that would be uploaded to YouTube as an independent project these days, and a pretty bad one at that. God knows how it got a release back in the day, but it's just that it's a bog standard possession film. It's a bog standard guy plays with Ouija board, gets like serial killer's soul in him, ends up killing people. It is just that, but the artwork on the front was really good. You know, it was really creepy and bizarre.
They always, I think the artwork was almost deceptive for a lot of these films.
Oh, definitely.
And then you look at the artwork, will be amazing, and then the film's awful.
The one that really sticks in my head, because we've still got the VHS at home, is the Evil Dead one.
Yes, the original Evil Dead one. Yeah,
the Evil Dead one is great, and that was another one we rented actually for when it was still available on VHS before they banned it under the video nasty scare.
Oh yeah, did Child's Play get affected by that? Because I feel like it did.
Actually, it's funny you should mention it, but the original Child's Play didn't. But there is a lot of controversy surrounding Child's Play 3. For a particular reason.
It's the James Bulger thing, isn't it?
It's the James Bulger thing, yeah. So you had the murder. It wasn't just the murder of James Bulger. When you read what they actually did to him, it's
horrific. Yeah, it's just pure evil.
But one of the things that the press latched onto was for some reason, as they always do, they want like an easy answer. They want a scapegoat, and it's never like. They never go into any great depth analysing like the socio-cultural factors that cause these things.
Of course.
It's just too much, isn't it, for their readership?
They watched this one thing and that's it. That's what it is.
And for some reason, they latched onto Child's Play 3, which was in the video library of one of the mothers of the killers, and for some reason they latched right onto it, even though there's nothing in the film that even
I was going to say, is there a scene where someone kills a kid?
No. There's not anything in the film that's even redolent of what happens.
So is this like with Columbine, where them lads happen to own a Marilyn Manson CD?
Exactly that. It's exactly that. It's the tabloids, and actually a fair few of the broadsheets as well. So let's not let them get away with it.
That's disappointing.
I'd
expect it of the tabloids,
right?
But yeah.
They actually took Child's Play 3 off the shelves. It was off the shelves for a long time, and not many outlets would put it on for the longest time, just because of this synthetic association that was drawn with the James Bulger killings.
Did you know about that, Rebecca?
About the Child's Play link?
Yeah.
Yeah, but they've done it so many times, but I think the reason with that one was just it was such a high profile thing and such a massive shock to everybody that a child would do that to a child. I think that's probably why it was taken so seriously, but it's a ridiculous association. It's like they did the same thing with video games and that Manhunt game, didn't they?
Many times. Night Trap, way back in the day on the Mega CD, they did it with that. Mortal Kombat, obviously, despite the fact that it's ridiculous, it's absurd.
My favourite thing on Mortal Kombat is the ridiculousn's of the gore. So like when you punch someone and the fatality, there's about 7 rib cages come out,
and it's like your character just touches the other character, and like it's fountains of just ketchup, isn't it? It's just
it's still as ridiculous in the new ones though. Like I've done moves in the middle of the fight where I've ripped someone's spine out, and then the fight carries on.
Oh yeah,
Oh, it's still going.
Well, in the new ones, they just play into it, don't they? They know that it's absurd, so they just go for it. Now, like when you play the new ones, whenever you do like a particular special move, it zooms in and it like X-rays the body and shows you all the ridiculous damage that you're doing to it. It's absurd. It's so funny. You can't even begin to understand why people react so violently to these things. The Evil Dead was one. The Evil Dead got targeted in the video nasty scare, and you watch the Evil Dead now, the original one, and you're like, really?
Yeah, it's not. Has Chucky been in any of the Mortal Kombat games? Because a few horror characters have, haven't they?
You know what? I don't know.
Freddy's been in one, Jason has, the Alien has, the Predator has.
Pinhead has,
They haven't had Chucky, have they?
I don't think they have, which is... I mean, it would be fun, wouldn't it? It'd be interesting to see how they'd introduce him. Because he would have to have a very particular fighting style.
I'd love to fight as Chucky.
That's just like... I've always wondered if the reason Rebecca finds haunted dolls so fascinating is because they're like the same height.
Oh, come on, Rex.
She's quite little. 'Cause, you know, there's that thing of like, if a monster is too big, it's not scary.
Yeah, it's
which
true.
is why, like, Jaws is the perfect sea monster size because it's bigger than a normal shark, but not so big that, because like once you get into like megalodon territory,
it's silly, isn't
it probably wouldn't even notice you. It'd be like a normal shark looking at a shrimp. It's going to be attacking orcas and whales and stuff. It's not going to go for a human if it's like 200 foot long.
Well, really, little things can be really scary. I mean, if you look at things like, because they can be insidious, can't they? It's that whole thing of exciting, like arachnophobia. You know, spiders can be terrifying because you don't know where they are or where they can be. The facehugger from Alien is a really good example.
Perfect. You know? Yeah, in some ways that's scarier than the giant thing because it's the full-grown xenomorph because it could be scuttling along the roof or you know, it's in the air. I should just point out, because I've had this on Twitter before, that because, you know, I do like to take the piss out of Rebecca, but I should just point out that in, you know, the real world offline, she is one of my closest friends.
Right.
But I have to point that out because I forget that people don't know this. So, like on Twitter, sometimes she'll put something on, and then I'll just take the piss because that's what I do.
Right.
But then I'll get messages from people telling me how mean it was, or you shouldn't talk like that to girls on the internet. And I'm like, you just stop with the white knighting because this is one of my actual best friends. Look, here's a photo of us together last week. You know,
for context, guys. You know?
I found it so funny when you told me about that because it's like. Nobody ever like goes on the post and says anything, so you can say, "Excuse me, go away." You know, it's just straight into your inbox.
Into your personal messages.
I don't get why they do it because I've never even given the slightest bit of a hint that I would want that.
Right.
Like, it's not really about you. It's about making themselves look good. It's that white knighting thing, isn't it? I'm going to dive in and save the pretty girl because I'm that awesome.
Which is ironically,
they won't say a word to me face, but behind the keyboard,
ironically,
Mr. Tough Guy.
There's kind of a misogyny inherent, isn't there? You know, it's like, you know, the fragile girl needs saving from the, you know, it's like, oh, come on, I'm sure you can give as good as you get, you know?
Yeah. You know? But, I mean, to be honest, she's not even that little, but it's just...
it's just the thing,
It's just become a thing now. But I should just point that out. I didn't actually know.
Disclaimer. Disclaimer.
I'm just trying to be a dick to this girl on podcast for no reason. Just, you know...
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Do you know what? You know, you were talking about just before that. You're talking about like that film you watched that was like a generic possession film.
Yeah, Don't Panic.
What that reminded me of is a film from a couple of years ago that just completely rips off the plot of Chucky, but does it without a doll.
Okay,
and it was called Prodigy.
Yeah.
Have you watched that?
I haven't seen that one.
Did you see that one, Rebecca?
I'm not sure.
So the plot is that this serial killer gets shot by police at the beginning.
So far, so Child's Play.
Does some sort of ritual.
Yeah.
And then the camera cuts to a woman giving birth that very night.
Right, so it's just gone into the baby, yeah?
And the baby, the child grows up, it keeps cutting forward through time, you keep seeing it, and it starts dressing like him and speaking like him. And then, it, you know, but it's just Chucky, but with a baby, with a kid, instead of... And I remember I watched it with my friends Chris and Sean, who were both big horror fans as well, and all three of us were like, this is Child's Play.
Yeah.
How have they got away with this?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Like, so many of those popular 80s franchises, they actually have sort of enshrined what horror has become, certainly in mainstream cinema down the decades since. So you can go like onto Netflix now. If you go into the horror section, you'll find the knockoff Hellraisers and the knockoff Poltergeists and the knockoff so on and so forth. And Child's Play was one of them. I mean, there had been like haunted doll or haunted like mannequin films before, you know, things like Magic and whatnot, but not to the same degree and not in the same way as Child's Play.
Well, that's, I mean, the popularity of The Ring that you spoke about earlier led to it. You know, like I remember a lot of people in early 2000s going, have you seen this Japanese or Korean horror film? Have you seen this Japanese? And I was always like, is the thing on it a girl with wet black hair over her face?
Yes, very often.
Because I'm not arsed if it is, because I've seen 17 of them already.
But
You
yeah,
know, it just became the thing. That's what every ghost. It walks shankily. She's got long black hair over her face. She appears at the end of a corridor. You know, that was like, can we do a different monster?
Yeah, the
It's like there was a
original.
period from about 2010 for a while where every horror movie ghost just looked like Marilyn Manson in Beautiful People video.
Yeah, it
Like
was.
the elongated face, the milky eyes,
Yeah.
you know.
It was when like the West really started to discover Japanese and Korean horror in particular,
Yeah.
because those were markets. I mean, that was obviously in the early days of the internet, so really we didn't have that universality yet. Where like if now if a good horror film comes out in Japan, you know it's everywhere, it's all over the place.
Of course you do.
But back then you didn't. So when the original Ring started to do the rounds here, often on bootleg, like VHSs and DVDs and whatnot, it was a bit of a phenomenon, you know, because we hadn't really seen like that coldness that Japanese horror often has, you know, where it's amoral. Like a lot of Western horror, a lot of English speaking horror it kind of has this sort of rote morality behind it, doesn't it? You know,
it's always that in some way the person getting attacked kind of deserves it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily as in they're actually a bad person, but they moved into the house that was on top of the graveyard, so
they
it's kind of their fault. Right. You know.
The Ring doesn't have that. The Ring, in a lot of Japanese horror in particular, innocence is no protection.
No.
It doesn't matter what you do, it will get you. Whatever it is, it will get you. And there's a lot of really good stuff out there. It's much easier to find now than it used to be. There are even like mainstream outlets now that actually have it up, like Shudder and one. It has quite a bit of Japanese horror. But a lot of it is also just put up on YouTube because you can't get it in any other way in the West. Some of it's balmy.
Do any of them do doll things? Because that just seems like something I could imagine being quite common in Japanese culture, but I don't know if I've ever heard of one.
I haven't seen.
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't seen one myself.
There's a Korean film called The Doll Master, and I haven't found many people at all that have seen this film, but it is actually one of the only films that's ever made me cry.
Okay.
It's basically, there's a doll maker, and she invites these people to her doll museum, and the idea is that they're going to model for a doll each. So they've kind of like won this situation, and they've got this invite. They're gonna have a doll made in their image, and strange things start to happen while they're there because they have to stay there on the grounds for a while. And there's this girl that keeps appearing in a red dress, and she's just repeatedly showing up. And it goes through this whole film and everything like that. And at the very, very end of the film, it turns out that that girl in the red dress is a doll that one of the main characters threw away as a child.
Right.
And she just got to that age. They did the same thing in Toy Story where, you know, they get to that age and they're not bothered anymore. And I think, did they have a song and dance number in Toy Story about this?
I think they probably did, yes. It definitely rings a bell. Jessie, yes, when Jessie was thrown out by her original owner.
Yeah. So, and the thing is, the deaths in The Doll Master are so stupid. They really are. They look absolutely ridiculous. But it's fun, and it's just such like a Korean and Japanese horror thing where they make dead people look absolutely ridiculous, but it somehow works.
Very often, it's very theatrical, isn't it? It's often very theatrical, where it's
like a stage, like the bone white and the eyes rolled up, and
it's one of those weird things. Like there are certain storytelling traditions in Japanese horror, where like the Japanese horror is often based in Japanese folklore, like in Shintoist stories and whatnot, and it's an entirely different set of mythological traditions and oral traditions than we have. You know, it's completely different. So there are certain things where you're like, what? that it just doesn't make sense to like a Western eye. It doesn't make any sense at all. But it's really interesting and weird and theatrical. Like, one of the things I notice in a lot of Japanese, certainly in like ghost stories and films about haunted houses, if there's a priest involved, they're not obviously not like a Christian priest. They're a Shintoist priest or they're a Buddhist priest, and they have these insane powers. They're like magicians rather than priests, yeah?
Yes.
It can often be really weird and strange and like slightly elevated and odd. It's like a battle between a magician and a demon,
Yeah, that's. I quite like seeing that kind of thing though, when it's a completely different. Even the basic, like the people who've grown up and written this, their experience of life to that point is so different than yours. That the stuff that they put in that isn't even a big deal for them, you still see it and think, "Well, that's weird."
Yeah.
And I think I like that. It kind of gives you that. Particularly, it's almost like it's more unnerving to watch it as a foreign viewer.
Yeah.
Because even the stuff that isn't unnerving is kind of jarring to you.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is why when you get a film where like it's somebody from the West who's moved to China or whatever and then gets a haunted house, you've got all the additional discomfort of, I can't even meet police because I don't speak Chinese.
Yeah. There's whole other tensions going on there, aren't there? And that's happening more and more, I noticed, with horror recently. You're getting like this, because the markets have been blown open, both in written fiction and also in TV series and film with like the advent of online platforms. There's this like efflorescence of what horror can do because it's drawing in all these different influences. I mean, there's a great one on Netflix at the moment, though I can't remember for the life of me what it's called, about the experience of refugees here in the UK.
Oh, I've watched that.
So good.
His House.
His House, yes, His House.
Very good film, that.
So good. Oh my God, I loved it.
The twist on that, when you realise why this thing's haunting this guy.
Right.
Because up to that point you think, this is a really nice, decent guy. Why is this happening to him?
But at the same time,
and then you see the explanation.
That whole thing of like seeing the UK through a refugee's eyes, and the distinction that's drawn between their set of traditions and like the coldness and the lack of narrative and mythology that exists here.
Yes.
I found that really beautiful and fascinating because there's almost like, what I loved is the way there's almost like, and the wife is the fulcrum of this, where she's like, you know what we have is better. We've got the demons and the monsters and the ghosts, but it's better than what they've got here. It's better than this soulless lack of anything, this emptiness.
Yeah.
I kind of loved that.
Yeah. It's a good film. It's a good horror film.
Clever stuff.
It's thought-provoking as well, but it was, I liked that one.
I liked it a lot.
I was just thinking, what other sort of, I don't think anything were quite as big as Chucky, but what other sort of haunted doll things have been out?
There's a big franchise that's a spin-off from, and Saving Your Presents, I hate these films, but a spin-off of the Conjuring series, which is Annabelle.
I don't mind them, I must admit. I don't think they're great, but I don't mind them. I know there's the Annabelle one, but I don't know if that really counts, because when you get Annabelle isn't a haunted doll.
No,
the doll never moves.
No,
the doll itself isn't a thing.
It's like a cipher, isn't it?
Something's in it that comes out and does stuff, but the doll doesn't move about. It's almost like saying, I've just bought a book off Amazon and it's arrived in a cardboard box. Annabelle is the cardboard
box. Yeah.
Annabelle itself doesn't do anything. It's something comes in it, and she is just the delivery package. Yeah, so I don't know if she's kind of an adjunct to haunted doll stuff, to be honest.
Yeah, you're right. There's also stuff like, I suppose, the Puppet Master films, which
I've never watched any of them.
They're silly, but they're fun.
Isn't there about 45 of them?
There's loads of them.
Yeah.
There's absolutely loads of them, and all the dolls are really interesting and like very distinct. They've all got really distinct personalities, and they're just like they're just silly. They're fun. That you can't. They're one of those films where I wouldn't even attempt to properly critique them because there'd be no point, you know? It's because they're designed to be low rent. They're like the Leprechaun films, you know?
Oh God.
They're designed to be absurd. They're designed to be ridiculous, which is ironically where the Child's Play films do go eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, by the fourth Child's Play films, they have actually abandoned horror. If you look at the description of Bride of Chucky, it's a dark comedy.
Yeah, oh yeah, totally.
Right.
I mean, it's even to the point whereby it's framed like a comedy, you know? It's
Yeah.
like the pacing is more comedy than horror. The only real, I mean, I don't know if you'd call it horror, but there's like gore and gross out stuff, but that's about it. That's as far as it goes.
Isn't there a segment in an old sort of like portmanteau horror film with a little doll?
Oh, I'm sure
I
there
keep
is.
seeing GIFs on it, but I don't know what it is. It looks like a little sort of tribal thing with a little spear.
I'm sure
it's like
there
from
is.
some
That's
creature
from
or
Trilogy
something
of
like
Terror.
that.
That's
Is that
from
what it is?
Trilogy of Terror, yeah.
Right.
Ah.
I've never watched it, but I keep seeing that in little GIFs and images and stuff like that.
It's kind of like same idea of Puppet Master, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a few haunted doll ones, like the Curse of Robert the Doll, the Boy.
Oh God!
They're
Did you
all...
watch the second Boy?
I'm not
No?
sure.
Don't think
Oh
I did,
God!
no.
Right. So the first film, have you both seen it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I quite liked it because I thought the twist was quite clever.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you are led to believe this is a haunted doll, but actually it isn't.
Yeah, right.
It's
I liked that.
Yeah. The second film undoes all of that.
Yeah.
And says that have you seen the second one, George?
No, I haven't seen the second one. No.
Well, the second one says that the doll is possessed.
Right, okay.
And that possessed doll causes people to like get attached to it and act as if it's real, which is why the real whatever his name was in the first film acted like that.
God,
but there's been other people like that before him.
Okay, that's very like circuitous and overcomplicated, isn't it?
It just kind of undoes everything about the first film.
That sounds like it would take a lot of exposition to explain.
It does. It's awful.
Do you have characters
Absolutely
standing
awful.
around talking about the plot, or like a lot? Yeah.
It's got almost like a Star Wars crawl at the beginning to kind of explain.
Really?
There's a film which I'm going to struggle to convince you to watch this, but
okay.
If I say it's the worst film I've ever seen in my entire life,
that kind of makes me want to see it. If I'm honest.
I want you both to watch it just to get your reactions off it. It's called The House on Cemetery Hill.
Okay.
Now, it's so. Like, there's nothing wrong with independent films, right?
Right,
and
yeah.
I will forgive an independent film that's got crap special effects,
yeah, totally.
or where the camera works a little bit dodgy because they couldn't afford rigging and that kind of thing, and or the fake blood's a bit shit because it's expensive. I understand that, I get that, that's fine, but it's one of those independent films where everything is bad with it. The actors are bad. The camera work's bad. The framing, stuff that you don't even notice usually because it's done so well.
Right.
Is done badly.
Right.
So like there'll be a shot where there's a scene where there's two people speaking, and for some reason the camera is framed at them so that they're on the left of the screen, and on the right you can just see an empty room and there's nothing happening. It's not like there's going to be something moving in that. No, it's just for some reason the camera isn't framed properly.
Oh,
and
God.
it's just things like, like if it was a picture you were taking, you'd crop it. That kind of thing. Yeah, and the dialogue's awful, and that is about a haunted doll.
Oh,
that is about a haunted doll, but it's so bad. I mean, I'm gonna have to find a clip of it,
please, because this sounds great. It sounds like awfully brilliant. You know what I mean?
I have got the DVD, so I don't know when I'm actually gonna see it, Rebecca, but I can lend it you. I know you've borrowed stuff off me before, but it's so bad. We watched it every year. We don't know when it'll be possible this year, but what me and Charlie and a couple of friends do is we go to Centre Parks and we have a week there. And one of the things we do is we take a bunch of horror films each.
Mm-hmm.
And in the evenings, after we've done all the activities and all that, we put the log fire on, turn the lights off, and watch some horror films. And we always take ones that we think the others won't have seen. So it's whatever's new out, basically. And this was one of the ones we took last year, and it was so bad. It was so bad. There's just nothing redeeming about it at all. Nothing.
That sounds great.
Up until that, the worst film I've ever seen was a film called Wolf, which the premise of that is a bunch of, again, the premise sounds like it's going to be good. It's a bunch of Roman soldiers fighting werewolves.
Yeah, sounds fun.
A legion goes to look at this area of northern England for settlement and doesn't come back. So another bunch of soldiers come to find them, and it turns out it's werewolf. But it's awful. Everything about it. One of the warning signs with Wolf is the fact that the lead actor, the director, the producer, and the scriptwriter are all the same guy.
Oh, that's
always a red flag.
Warning signs.
Yeah, because it's a rich theatre kid vanity project, isn't it? Straight away, you've got that, you know. Yeah. So that was up until House on Cemetery Hill. That was the worst film I've seen. But now this one was like, no, it's so bad. It's inconceivably bad. It's not even like so bad that it's good. It's just awful.
Is it like awe-inspiring? Did you sit there watching
it's like The Room.
Yeah.
That where you just watch it and think, this is like an experiment.
Yeah.
It's like a psychology experiment to finish it.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you have this thing when you're watching it where you're like, this cannot be real. Somebody is taking the piss here.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got. You're gonna have to watch it. I'm gonna have to. Yeah, you have to make. I'll remind you about it.
But it is funny, isn't it? Because and I imagine this. It's not just because of the Child's Play films, but I imagine their success definitely inspired it. But like the doll horror, not just haunted doll horror, but horror that focuses around like the imagery of dolls and whatnot, has now become a sub-franchise, hasn't it? I mean,
like Clowns.
It's It, isn't it? Yeah, it's because of it.
Yeah.
But if you go and you could literally go onto Amazon and just randomly find an anthology of horror short stories. Odds on, at least one of them will be like a doll horror story.
Yeah.
There are. I wouldn't be surprised if there are anthologies out there that are all doll horror stories.
What do you think that comes from? I've never quite understood it with Clowns. Was it the genesis of that?
It may have been. Well, I think it's not just it, but I think it's probably just that clowns have always been naturally kind of creepy and weird to kids. Yeah. You know, they're the kind of thing. Clowns are the kind of thing where adults think that kids like them, but hardly any kid actually does.
Yeah,
you know,
like the child character in cartoons.
Exactly.
Like, there's not a child alive who actually likes Robin. You'd be fine with just Batman.
Right.
But adults think that children want a child sidekick, so they put one in there.
The
it's
Scrappy
that kind
Doo
of thing.
syndrome.
Yeah.
Scrappy Doo syndrome. Yeah, it's exactly that. There's also, there's lots of other stuff like culturally. There's John Wayne Gacy, obviously, who used to dress up as a clown when he killed or kidnaps his victims. With the dolls, I was thinking about this before I came on, but there may be like a really deep, dark association there, because of course there is the whole thing involving witchcraft and dolls.
Yeah.
Which is actually not just, it's traditionally painted as an African thing, as a voodoo thing. It's not. It's actually
it's not voodoo.
It's not. It's a Western witchcraft thing. The notion of the puppet that you stick pins in and whatnot.
Yeah, that's not voodoo. The voodoo doll isn't a real thing because it doesn't exist in voodoo, does it? There is a ritual within sort of Haitian mythology involving healing with a doll and needles, and that's what people think. But it's not a negative. I'm going to stab his eyes, it's like he's got pain in his shoulder, so we use this doll to do the psychic energy in the shoulder. And it's
a Western thing. It's like a Western witchcraft thing and it's likely, like most notions of witchcraft, it's not even probably true. It's just an exaggeration.
Yeah.
But it may derive from that.
I was quite horrified to learn the origin of the broomstick thing.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Do you know this, Rebecca?
The broomstick.
Why they say about witches riding broomsticks?
No, go on. This sounds
Right,
interesting.
okay. Well, witches were generally single women who didn't have access to a man or the equipment that a man would provide. So when the locals used to talk about she rides her broomstick,
It's a bit of a euphemism.
that is what they meant. Is not sitting on it sideways and flying around.
Yeah.
That's what that means.
Well, it's funny how much of like what people thought of as witchcraft or signs associated with witchcraft, quote unquote, were just like condemnations, like patriarchal condemnations of female sexuality. They just were,
Of course
you know.
it is, yeah.
They just almost all of it is to do with men's neurosis about sexuality, you know. So that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, that's great. Do you think the dolls there's any of the uncanny valley thing there?
Oh, definitely. I mean, human beings are generally. I mean, you find it in science fiction as well, with like cyborgs and whatnot, or with like synthetic humans. Human beings are naturally distressed by synthetic things that resemble human beings.
One of the reasons I've heard for that is it's an evolutionary thing. In that it goes back to the times with the wars with the Neanderthals, where you would have another race that looked almost like us but not quite.
Not quite, yeah.
And that they were a threat to us.
Yeah.
And that it's still in our genes to be afraid of things that look almost like us but not quite.
But
just in the same
quite,
way that when you see someone throw up, it makes you want to throw up, because historically you'd all be sat around the fire eating the same food. So if the guy next to you just threw up, it's probably something wrong with the food, and you're just eating it as well, so that you need to throw up. Or why people are scared of spiders, because millennia ago spiders were something that one bite and you die. So you know, it's still in your genes to be afraid of this, even though logically there's no reason to.
There's no reason whatsoever.
The uncanny valley thing is the same, and one theory for that is because of the Neanderthal wars with Homo sapiens, and that is still in there, and that's the most sensible explanation I've heard, to be honest.
I suppose there's also just a natural like inbuilt confusion, isn't there? You know, no matter how sort of the rational parts of your brains work, it's a thing that, to all intents and purposes, has all the indicators of being a human being.
Yeah.
But is not. It's empty. It's soulless. It's, you know. So I suppose that there's an element of that too. There's something rather distressing and innately creepy about it. I mean, that you could take it another way. You could take it down like a socio-cultural and like feminist route as well. I mean, I find the notion, the way, like, and you see it if you go back and watch like toy adverts for children, like from the 1980s and prior, the way in particular little girls are sort of programmed by the toys they're given to be this or to be that. Yeah. So you are going to be a mother someday, so here's the doll, this is what you're going to be. There's something innately creepy about that. But yeah, I think it's lots of factors. It's likely one of those things where there's no clear answer. There's just lots and lots of influences that make them creepy. But at the same time, just like what we were talking about at the beginning with Child's Play, you've got like that wonderful tension and ambiguity and build-up where you're always at is the kid like really disturbed? And then when the doll kicks off, ultimately, and you know it's the doll, it's not that scary anymore. It's really not.
I think you could say that about a lot of monsters, that once you've seen it, now it's just a thing to be fought, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It's absolutely true. And a lot of horror really acknowledges that, doesn't it? Like, some of the best horror, I love suggestive horror, you know, where you only see like skitters of things or suggestions of things where you're not quite sure it's there, or even like, you know, those really sophisticated horror films where you're not even sure what you've seen. Where there's something on screen and you don't know it's there, and you have to like rewind to have a look.
They do that really well with the BBC adaptation of. I'm going to have to lend you this box set, Rebecca, because I've told you about it before. But the BBC did a series of adaptations of M.R. James's stories called really Ghost Stories for Christmas, and they're great. They're really great.
That collection is awesome.
The what? Sorry.
That collection that you were talking about, the Ghost Stories for Christmas. It's
beautiful.
Awesome.
But they did one of the story, The Treasure of Abbot Thomas. Now, in that, have you read that one, Rebecca? I know you've been reading some of M.R. James's stuff.
I might have done. I've got like a collection by him, but it's quite some time since I read it, so I couldn't tell you the title.
The title, yeah. Well, the Treasure of Abbot Thomas is about this priest who discovers that a former priest who worked at the church where he is had some treasure that he'd come by, and he hid it. And it can be discovered via like a series of clues, basically. But it comes with a warning that he has set a guardian to protect it. All of which is ignored by this priest investigating stuff, of course. Because ignoring warnings is kind of a trait within an M.R. James story.
It's an M.R. James trope, isn't it? Like, almost every character I can think of in an M.R. James story is told, don't do it.
Don't do this.
Don't
and
go and, and then they go and do it.
And this, so he inevitably finds this treasure, and it is guarded by something.
Yeah.
All he describes it as is darkness and slime. And it follows him out of, he finds it underground in this crypt, like in the sewers, and it follows him out of there. Every morning he has to barricade his door at night because it only comes at night, and every morning there's like a slime trail as if some colossal slug has come up to his door, and all it describes it as is, he says he knocks down this wall in this crypt and he can see what he thinks is a big wet black sack, which he thinks, the treasure's in that sack. So he reaches down to pick up this sack, and the quote-unquote sack wraps multiple limbs around him. Like a octopus or something like that. He breaks himself free, runs on, and that's I'm not going to give away the full ending of it, but the way they do this in the film adaptation is exactly what George just said, in that you almost have to, even if you pause it and rewind it, you don't get a good look at it. You see him smash the wall down, something is there that moves and comes on him, and you don't see what it is. You only see the traces of it. You see the slime trails, you see him being traumatized, but you never properly see it.
Yeah.
And I think that is such a good decision, particularly because this film was made in about 1972 on a BBC budget. So if you did see it, it'd be some rubber Doctor Who bullshit.
50 pence and half a curly whirly. Yeah, that's basically it. That's the budget. Yeah.
So not seeing it is definitely the right way to go. But it's so, because you don't, that makes it all the more terrifying.
It does work so well, doesn't it?
I prefer things that work like that, to be honest. And sometimes less is just more.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not necessarily that seeing the monster then makes it less scary, but it's like what you just said. It depends on budget. It depends on what you're using to make this monster, and also on how scary it's still going to be, because I think it's one of the Conjuring films, the demon in that looks so ridiculous. It looks like Nicolas Cage dressed up as Darth Maul.
You mean Insidious?
Insidious,
Is it that one?
Yeah.
It's like a red kabuki mask, and it's dancing about, and it's like, oh god.
Up to that
point, as soon as that came on screen, I just burst out laughing.
Up to that point,
that film's pretty good.
There's some good atmosphere, isn't there? There's like some good backstory, and it's like building, and then you see it, and you're like, really?
They do a lot of corner of the eye stuff in that film, don't they? Where you kind of glimpse something in the corner, but it's not quite there, and all that's really good. But then, you see the demon, and it's awful once you see it.
Yeah, I love that shit. But
it does look like Darth Maul. It really does.
Yeah, but the thing is, once you've seen it, very often, it's not universally the case. Sometimes it's done really well, or it's essential for the story, but often once you've seen it, it confines it, doesn't it? It defines what it is, and it's somehow, it's combatable then. It's comprehensible. And what M.R. James does really well, and which most of the BBC adaptations adapt really well, is that it's the fear of the ultimately unknown. You know, when it's still unknown and incomprehensible, then it's really frightening, because you just don't. There's no rules. You don't know what it's going to do. You don't know how it's going to come upon you. Like you get that in Whistle and I'll Come to You, obviously, where you just see those. And again, you're right, Lex. It is often a matter of budget, but often that low budget drives the invention, where you just see these long shots of the desolate beach, and there's just like this indiscernible figure.
Oh, that's terrifying. Because it does that thing that you were talking about earlier, where you're right, it confuses you, and that makes it scary.
Yeah. Because
it doesn't look like something that should exist. Because I've spoken to Rebecca about this before, because I know she's read Whistle. What they do with it on that BBC adaptation is it's basically like a torn up, burnt, damaged old piece of sheet on a fishing line that's kind of whizzed along the beach, but then frames are taken out of the sequence so it doesn't move properly.
Yeah.
It's like jerky and janky, and you see it, and your brain just goes no. That's the and that is exactly the effect that you want, because your brain is going no, this isn't right. Things don't move like that. What is it? I can't see what it is.
Yeah,
and
that's
it's
great.
terrifying, and it's great, and yet it will have cost them about £4.
Right. I mean, a lot of the there was that efflorescence of Slenderman projects on YouTube in the sort of mid to late early 2000s.
Yeah.
There was a lot of them are really good. A lot of them are really ropey, obviously. There's a lot of really bad ones, but the ones that are done well, like Marble Hornets and like Everyman Hybrid, they utilize those exact features, because of course these guys have got no budget. They've got the camera and they've got their own software and their own stuff at home, so they have to, by necessity, utilize every trick in the book, and often it works so well. It works so well to create that feeling of the uncanny, and it even works when it does look theatrical and ropey and weird. That helps somehow. It just makes it even the more disturbing.
Yeah.
I really liked the Marble Hornets ones of those.
I loved Marble Hornets.
It's one of those things, I hadn't actually heard anything about the Slender Man until I watched the Marble Hornets stuff.
Right.
And I loved it. I got so interested in the Slender Man after that, and every day I was like, I want to know more about this.
Likewise.
But then one night I was laid in bed and I realised it had scared the crap out of me. And it was years since I've had that feeling. Probably actually from when I watched The Ring when I was little, and then like had that the night after. But nothing ever seems to hit me the same night I actually watch it. It's like
you have to process
another night
it
when I'm
first,
least expecting it. My brain will just go, but what if?
Right. I had the same reaction to the Slender Man. I think Marble Hornets may have been my introduction to him as well, and it may have just been as simple as one very bored evening typing in independent horror on YouTube and just finding the videos, And it obsessed me for a long time. I've got to say, I was like, when's the next upload? I just can't wait,
I've got a Slender Man dummy in my loft.
Yes, I remember you saying
before. I'll show you a picture of it. You'll see it if either of you come to Halloween when I'm allowed to have an Halloween party.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I usually hang it up in the corner of the room. It's like a tall dummy with a blank face, wearing a suit, and then it's got spider legs at the back of it.
It's just the simplest thing, isn't it? It's the simplest thing, but that's often what's so
hanging in the corner of my loft where my Halloween decorations are. So when you go up there, it's just there in corner. Which is pretty cool.
Did you guys see Host on Shudder?
No, I've not got Shudder, but I keep hearing that Host is a good film.
Yeah, I mean, I went out to watch it because I've got a real thing for the found footage horror. I mean, I
do like them. I'm a big defender of them.
I'm a big fan of found footage horror, and people in the horror community were just going, "Wow, this is so good." I was seeing it everywhere. Like everyone was talking about it. I was like, "Oh, okay, I've got to see this." And it's one of those weird things where it is really good for what it tries to do. Like it's so well done. It's a whole film directed, shot, scripted in the midst of lockdown. So it was directed over Zoom. It was actually
impressive.
And that's so impressive, isn't it? I think maybe because of my background in found footage, I really love that stuff. Maybe it felt less ambitious than some. Because it's very pure, basically. It's not like, say, you watch the Blair Witch Project, you watch The Last Broadcast, and they've got all of these complex commentaries about technology and about the nature of film and all that kind of thing. This doesn't have that. It is a very pure, very immediate horror film, and it does it really well. I've got to say, it evokes dread and tension brilliantly. But there's a sequence in that involving where like a character inevitably hears like a sound up in the loft, and they take their little like mobile camera up there, and they won't go up themselves, but they put like a camera on a selfie stick.
Yeah.
They put that up, and it's panning around, and as it's panning around, you can't really see anything, but you maybe think you see something, and it pans back and it's gone. And it's
Okay,
like,
I always like that.
I love it.
That doubt of like, did I just see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. You know, when horror films trick you, when they like say, "Oh no, you didn't see that. That's you. There's something wrong with you." You know, that's brilliant, isn't it? That's an amazing thing for horror films to do. I remember the first film that ever did that. It was do you guys remember Ghostwatch?
Oh yeah.
From 1992.
Yeah.
The BBC
I don't think I saw
prank.
it live. I don't think I saw it live, but I remember it being on and I've watched it.
That does that all the time. Like the first sequence in the whole thing, you know, when you're getting the footage from the purportedly haunted bedroom.
Yeah.
And if you look in the corner, there is so a figure there. There is like an outline of a figure in the dark against the curtains, right? And but when in the it's a long time later as well. They're in the studio with Parky and like, you know, all the characters, and they're getting calls coming in saying, "Oh well, you know, some of the people are phoning in and saying that they've seen a figure in that footage we were running earlier. So shall we run it back?" And you know what they've done, the bastards? When they run it back, they're taking it out. It's really clever. So you think, "Oh, did I see that?"
Yeah, that's very clever because then you're doubting yourself.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
That's brilliant. I love that. I think that is so clever because again, you have to bear in mind this is pre-internet. It wasn't out on video or DVD or anything. So
you couldn't Google.
Right.
Did they do that and then find a Wikipedia entry telling you that that's what they'd done?
You would be freaked out by that, especially considering that when it aired, they aired it as though it was deathly serious.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
They aired it as though it was like a full-on documentary. So like, can you? I mean, I did watch it when it was on when it was a kid, but you know what ruined it for me? My mum.
She recognised.
She recognised the the parapsychologist. She recognised it. She said, "Hang on." I so remember this because me and my brother were like crowded around the TV. We were so into this. We were like, "Oh my god, this is like, could this be real?" You know. And then my mum said, "Hang on. I've seen that woman in such and such before. This is bullshit." And I was like, ah. But you know, at that point, it actually improved the experience, I suppose, because we weren't like watching it under false pretenses then, as most of the country apparently was, considering the complaints they got about it the next day.
Yeah, I bet it did.
Oh, it still holds a record for. It's not the most complaints, but it's like the second most complained thing that was ever on.
That's interesting because it's usually about sex things, isn't it? That you get complaints.
No, this scared people.
Yeah, that's what
I was going to ask if it was that one that got it.
It genuinely scared people. This one, they didn't know. If you watch the documentaries about it and you talk to Stephen Volk about it, they're like, no, we thought people would get it. They thought people would understand after.
People would know it were a joke.
But do you know what happened? People got so scared by it, they turned it over.
So they didn't see that it was getting increasingly ridiculous.
Right. If you watch towards the end, like Parky gets possessed at the end, so it's like, oh, right, okay, yes, this is a joke.
This is stupid. This is a joke. Yeah.
But people didn't. They got so frightened by it that they turned it off. So come the next day, the BBC switchboards they broke down. They couldn't get apparently it was like the BBC went on to damage control. People were outraged. They were outraged. Oh God. Which is ironic because we loved it. My brother.
Yeah, I bet you did. Yeah. I on about ghost programs. I often tweet things about ghost stuff and put Yvette Fielding in it, and she always responds. She's so lovely.
Oh right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've tweeted her a couple of times about stuff and had a chat with her. She's just really nice.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I was talking to her about there's a road near where I live. Rebecca will know it because she lives about 10 minutes from me. There's a called the Stockbridge Bypass, which is meant to be haunted. We spoke about it before.
Yes,
George.
I was going to say that. Yeah, that does ring a bell.
Yeah, I think we need to get a bunch of horror people to come and we'll film it. We'll do a most haunted ourselves.
I'm so up for that.
When we're allowed to gather, we'll just still out be a laugh.
Oh, it would be so much fun. You know what the thing is? Because if we do it like soon after we're allowed to gather together, we'll all be so relieved we won't care even if we do see something. You know?
Yeah.
They'll be like, oh great, there's a ghost! Yay, we're out and with people. Woo!
Exactly, yeah. But yeah, I was tweeting about that and saying, have you not done a more sort of there? And we kind of established that it's a bit tricky because it's an outdoor location and it's just like a vague somewhere on this road rather than walking around the halls of a castle or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
And then the other time, there was an article on a news website about a mansion that supposedly used to be a zoo and it's haunted by the ghost of a masturbating ape.
All right.
So I tweeted that and said, please do a more haunted here, you know. And she responded to that and said, oh, we definitely will.
That you must have seen that, you know, that infamous most haunted clip of Derek doing his Mary Loves Dick thing.
Oh, Mary Loves Dick, yeah.
That brings it into like a whole new context, doesn't it, you know?
Yeah.
God almighty, Mary Loves Dick.
Yeah. I love how every ghost he ever gets possessed by has a Scouse accent.
It's funny,
it's amazing, isn't it? That's something actually which was really good on quite an interesting loop back round on the beginning of the Treasure of Abbot Thomas adaptation. They are doing a seance, and this priest who is investigating, who finds the treasure ultimately, likes to expose the fact that these things are bollocks.
Yeah.
He goes to this seance, he's invited to one, so he goes to one. And the woman who's the ghost speaks through me sort of thing, says, oh, I've got the ghost of a minister who worked here 400 years ago. So this priest starts speaking to him in Latin. And the woman can't respond.
Yes, of course.
And he's like, oh, that's interesting. A priest who lived here in that time had spoken Latin. But hang on, the priest you mentioned was also French, so maybe he spoke French instead. So then he speaks in French, and she don't understand that either. And it's like a really good way of exposing the fact that, you know, it's funny that a priest from that era would not have spoke English. He would have spoken French or Latin, and yet you don't speak either. That's odd, and that was great. But that's what I always think of with Derek, in that they've always got a Scouse.
They're always Scouse and they're always English, regardless of where he is. You know, didn't they do an episode in like Vlad Tepes's castle?
They did. I don't know if I saw it, but they did. Yeah.
I mean, he should be speaking like ancient Romanian, you know. Yeah. So like, I don't think so, Derek. Somehow, I don't think so. You know.
Yeah, I like that trope anyway, though, that demons always settle on Latin.
Yeah, why is that? It's either Latin or Aramaic.
I mean, if a demon is a thing, and it is what is told to be, which is like a fallen angel. Right. They would have existed before mankind even developed the concept of language.
Right.
So by the time Aramaic or Latin came along, dozens of languages had come and gone. Why have they settled on that one?
Right, why that one? It's because it's human, isn't it? You know, it's a human thing. It's because Latin... I mean, that's the funny thing about Latin. People ascribe, like, mythical and mythological tendencies to it.
Yeah.
And it's just a language. It's just a language like any other, you know. You're still saying the same stuff. You know, just because you're saying, oh, I want to go to the toilet in Latin, it doesn't make it any less funny or silly or whatever. You know what I mean?
About it. Yeah.
But it may sound that way, but just because of the way it is, you know.
Yeah.
So silly. It's because, of course, it was the language of scholars for the longest time. You know, that's why too. I
think it's a biblical link, and because the Bible translations were originally in Latin and all of that.
And also, it was the language of scholasticism for a long time. So, like, it did become bound up with alchemy and occultism and all that kind of thing. So a lot of like grimoires and whatnot are written in Latin. You know, the original copies are written in Latin. But even so, they're still just words. They're still just, you know, it's no different from speaking English or whatever. You know? I would have thought, like, even if magic were real, you know, if like invocations were real, I would have thought that part of the wisdom of learning about it would be realizing that the language doesn't matter.
No, it shouldn't be. It should be irrelevant.
Right.
It should be absolutely irrelevant. Because words aren't like numbers. You know, numbers are not interchangeable. You know, if you want to figure out what 2 + 2 is, there's only one answer to that. Whereas words are infinitely interchangeable. Even within its own language, you've got like 5 words meaning the same thing.
Right.
So
especially in English.
For a yes, exactly. So for a conjuration or something, words should not be the deciding factor.
It's intention, isn't it? Surely.
Which makes you think about Brad Dourif's character. What's he called, Chucky? Charles
Lee Ray. Charles Lee Ray.
Does it matter what he said? Or is it?
Yes, there is a specific incantation, isn't there? Which I'm sure, I don't know what it is, but there is a specific incantation, and yes, it has to be right, and it has to be in exactly the right sort of sequence. Yeah, and it has to be complete. It has to be complete as well. Like, I think at the end of Child's Play 2, he almost does it. But it's like he's like on the last syllable when he gets shot away from Andy or whatever.
Right.
So yeah.
Is it him all the way through the films then? The same actor?
Yeah. It's Brad Dourif. Yeah.
Except in the remake, obviously.
Oh yeah, it's not Brad Dourif in the remake. And it's a shame. I mean, Brad Dourif is great in everything. You know, he's
in Lord of the Rings, isn't he?
Yeah, he's Green Wormtongue.
Yeah.
Incredible actor. He's also in The Exorcist 3 Legion, and he's fantastic.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Oh my God.
In the Alien films as well.
He is. Yeah, he's Alien Resurrection. Yeah, he's the scientist that ends up sort of like cultivating the new aliens, yeah.
Right.
And he's as weird and deranged and bizarre as you'd imagine a Brad Dourif role to be. But he's like brilliant in everything he's in. It's just a shame that in Child's Play you only get to see him like, what, 10, 20
Yeah,
minutes?
but his voice sort of gives it the pathos that it has, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, to me, Chucky is Brad Dourif. That is the voice of Chucky.
Definitely. That's where most people know him from, to be honest.
Thing is, Brad Dourif's one of those actors, you can get a film and it can be absolutely awful, but if he's in it, he kind of raises it up a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what,
the incantation that Chucky does is called the Damballa chant.
The Damballa chant, that's it.
Yeah, but it gets quite comedic in the end, doesn't it? Because every time he tries to do it, something cuts him off, and it just gets increasingly more amusing.
Yeah, every time. Like, there are points where he's almost there. You know, he's like right on the edge, and like whenever he's saying it, like reality warps, doesn't it? So you get like clouds forming and lightning flashes and all sorts.
Also, it's quite a big deal then.
Oh yeah, it's like a big I mean, when he does it in the Toy Story, it destroys the store, doesn't it? It's like this.
Why is he able to do this? I know you said someone taught him, but I mean, fine, but why is he? Because like most things where someone has access to some sort of power, there's like a tremendous cost to it, isn't there?
Yeah.
Like, you can do this, but you don't have to kill 10 people, or why can he? If it's that easy to do, you just say a few words and put your hand on something. Why can't everyone do it? Why can't he do?
Pass. Plot convenience.
Yeah, I don't think that's ever actually covered.
No, it's not. Unfortunately,
I think you're just supposed to appreciate the crazy doll.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's just the excuse to get the crazy living doll, isn't it? That's it. And it's a shame, really, because they could go into that.
Yeah, if that could be a thing for the other films.
Yeah,
the
if they wanted to expand
the
story, they could really go into the metaphysics here. And why him? Why is Charles Lee Ray peculiarly good at it? Or bad, as the case may be,
Has it happened a lot before? Has there been sort of killers and stuff who've jumped from one body to another, and you could go into the history of that and say that's why they never caught Jack the Ripper, because he jumped into someone else, and
that could be really fascinating, couldn't it? They could really go deep with this.
It doesn't have to focus on Chucky. It could focus on the world in which he's a part, which kind of leads to the one we know about. But that power, this is obviously a world where that voodoo magic is a real thing.
Yeah, totally.
So that there's a lot more you can expand upon with that.
And it's also, it's beyond that as well, isn't it? Because we do see him using other voodoo witchcraft powers as well. In the first film, when he goes to visit the guy who taught him, he knows that this guy is kind of powerful, so he actually creates a voodoo doll of him, and to coerce him, he keeps breaking its limbs and
okay, yes, so I remember that actually.
He can do other things as well. There are other powers involved here. And it is implied that actually Chucky is like well versed in this stuff. You know, he knows how to do it. He knows a lot of the actual rites and whatnot. So, yeah, there's a whole sub-mythology that is just never explored at all.
But like, isn't a lot of storage you could get from it.
Stuff like that's not usually meant to be abused, though, is it? Which is why, is it almost like a fate thing that he becomes trapped in that?
I think that's probably it. Yeah, because basically that's why he goes to this guy. He actually wants him to help him, and the guy refuses. You know.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he says to him. You know, like, you use my gifts for evil, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. So.
Yeah.
There's also like a weird metaphysics that involving the doll itself. Like the longer his soul stays in the doll, the more organic it becomes.
I was gonna say I remembered something about that because the doll looks far more. Even I know he's got injuries on it, but even besides that, it looks far more like animated later on in the film than it does at the very start, where it looks proper plastic toy.
He starts to feel pain, and it starts to bleed. He starts to actually bleed, like it becomes more organic as time goes on. So the longer he's in the doll body, the more likely it is he's going to be trapped in it, basically.
That's a good feature, isn't it? I like that. The idea that it becomes more human.
Yeah, that is cool. That is very cool indeed.
And that's the point where you get in with the ripped off face and the staples and all that kind of stuff, because like there's a few scenes at the beginning where it is just stuffing and stuff like that when he gets injured, but then like you say, then as they go on, they get more and more gory.
Yeah. And it's used to good effect, actually. You start to get some really nasty moments in like the Child's Play films where he gets limbs lapped off and he actually starts to feel pain, which is interesting. I just like the notion that there's like a beating heart in this doll and
that's
blood
creepy
and stuff. Is like nice.
What do you think about I know they never go into it because it's really not relevant, but like, what's the rules of the universe of Toy Story? Because if you've watched the fourth one, have you seen the fourth one?
Yeah, I loved it.
Have you watched it, Rebecca? Right.
No, I think I've seen the first two.
Okay.
Such good films. All of them.
They are
such
really
good films.
But something really bizarre happens in the fourth film, which is that a little girl gets a plastic fork, sticks a couple of googly eyes on it, and makes it some arms out of pipe cleaners, and then it becomes alive.
Yes, it becomes a toy, doesn't it?
Because it's technically a toy, now it's alive, which opens some really bizarre questions about the nature of this universe.
Well,
and, when is life granted to these things?
Metaphysically,
So the question is then, is it the fact that it's become a toy, or is it like in the Doll Master that I was talking about earlier, that doll that it turns out was her doll when she was younger, she loved it so much that she gave it a soul?
Yeah, there does seem to be
it's
that
like
element.
Imbued with because you see in the first film, you see aisles and aisles of Buzz Lightyear toys in a shop, but they're not alive. They're not moving and talking. It's only when a child takes them home and loves them and has this concept of this is my toy, that's when they become alive, isn't it?
So it seems to be like the child imbues them with some essence or whatever. Yeah, that does seem to be the case, but it's like it's still a creepy universe.
It really is.
It's still a creepy universe because, of course, and you know what I love about the Toy Story films? They actually go for it. They actually do show you this is an innately sad universe because, of course, toys get abandoned, toys get lost, toys get broken, and it happens.
That fourth one, there's a lot of good stuff in the fourth one, but there's a doll. I hope you don't mind me spoiling it, Rebecca.
No, you're all right.
It's this doll who's like a 1950s doll who has been left in this antique shop, and she's one of them dolls that you pull a cord and she speaks like Woody.
Yeah.
But her cord is broken. She's got no voice box, and she has spent decades and decades convincing herself that one day she'll be able to fix her voice box, and then the little kid will take her home and she'll be their favourite toy. And when she meets Woody, there's like a whole thing goes on, and she steals his voice box and puts it in herself, and she's convinced herself that this is the thing, And then a little girl picks her up, plays with her, puts her back, and chooses another toy. And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's
because
devastating, isn't it?
This is the world for toys in that there's not, you cannot force a child to want you to be their favorite toy. You know, you and the fact that she spent so long convincing herself that all she needs is to fix the voice box, and then she doesn't, but then that still doesn't count. It still doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Kids still don't want to play with her. It's just awful. When
It's
you
really
think about
sad,
it.
Isn't it? It's really
sad. And she's meant to be the de facto villain in that film.
She's kind of the antagonist, isn't
but
she?
She's not when you see this. And it's like Lotso in the third film.
From the third film, yeah. I mean, he's just a damaged guy, isn't he? That's all, you know.
In that one, you haven't watched the third one, have you, Rebecca?
No, I don't think so.
There's this Teddy he sounds like he's voiced by Robert De Niro, but I don't know if he actually is.
I don't think it's Robert De Niro, but it is like one of those really venerable, gruff old actors, you know? I can't remember who it is.
This Teddy who's he was this little girl's favourite toy, and she loses him. He like falls out the car window or something on a trip, so like lands in a puddle. So then he spends ages like finding his way home to her, because it's like, that's my little girl. She'll be so upset that she's lost me. I'm going to get home to her. And he gets home, finally gets home to her. He's all knackered and ripped up and stuff and covered in mud, peers through the bedroom window, and she's got another toy just like him.
Yeah.
Because the parents have replaced it.
Oh.
Yeah.
And but this is the world that they live in. That kind of shit's gonna happen all the time.
I mean, like, to make it even darker, that like traumatizes him and pushes him over the edge into like nihilism. He goes like mad, doesn't he? You know?
Yeah, it becomes really dark about the concept of toys being a thing for kids.
It's really unpleasant. It's really
dark. It's really sad. It's really
that whole
sad.
film, actually, Toy Story 3 is really bloody sad all the way through.
Yeah, it is, because Andy is like 18 and he's going off to college and he doesn't want toys anymore, and it's But the fact that he aids a character through the films is great.
It's brilliantly done, and it's like, it's not just him. Like, the toys are evolving and learning as well. You know, their world is changing around them, and they're kind of learning that things aren't permanent, and it's never going to be permanent. You know. It's very sad. There's like a real wrenching but brilliant lesson there about accepting change, and you know, it's lovely. It's a really stunning children's film, that one.
I think the fourth one in particular feels like it was not made for kids. No. It feels like it was made for adults who were kids when the first one came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're kind of carrying on the series.
Yeah. I'm not saying there's anything in it that's dark or...
Oh, no, it's just
but it's the storyline. There's no, like, funny, jokey snowman character or anything like that. It feels, everything in it has got pathos to it. It's all got emotional depth. It's not got lots of silly slapstick bits. So it's really quite powerful, deep story, and it really feels as if it was made for grown-ups.
The end is an emotional, like, roller coaster. It's just it's a very complex lesson. It's about, like, again, it's about accepting change and learning that things aren't permanent, and that sometimes what you think you want isn't really what you want. You know, it's
Pixar's good for that, though. Stuff where you're not expecting it to be that powerful, and then it is.
Oh yeah, I mean, some of them are just gorgeous. So like the first 20 minutes of Up.
Oh God
almighty. Jesus Christ.
Have you watched that one, Rebecca?
Yeah.
Oh,
you've got Disney Plus now, so you can watch all these. But the first 10 minutes of Up is awful.
Yeah, it's really like, oh my God.
There's another one. Have either of you watched Inside Out?
Yeah, Inside Out's really good.
Have you watched that one, Rebecca?
I don't think I have. What's that one?
I would recommend it. It's where you find out it goes inside this girl's brain, and there's all her different emotions have a little physical embodiment. Yeah. So there's like anger, and joy, and sadness. And have you watched it?
I haven't watched it, but I've heard that much about it and seen that many GIFs and pictures that I kind of feel like I have.
You should watch it, though, because it's very clever.
It's very clever.
Deep. And not to spoil it, but she has this imaginary friend. The little girl's about 10 or 11, and in her brain has different sections, like including stuff that she's forgotten about. Mm-hmm. And there's like different levels of memory. There's stuff that you think you've forgotten about, but then you can be reminded of it. Excuse me. But then there's your full-on forgotten about, as in nothing's ever going to make you remember this. There's that section, which is just like a void, like a black hole. And in the section above that lives this character called Bing Bong, who was this character who was her imaginary friend when she was about 4. And he's like a pink elephant with a top hat made out of candy floss, right? Just like a proper 4-year-old's imaginary character. And he has been spending forever trying to get back into her memory so she remembers him again. Because he's just down there on his own. He's like a little hermit now. During the course of the film, you don't mind me telling you about this, do you, Rebecca?
No.
During the course of the film, her joy, the character which embodies her joy, gets lost in the deeper memory. If she doesn't get back, this little girl will never be happy again because she's like physically, mentally incapable of being happy unless her joy is brought back. She ends up where Bing Bong is, and Bing Bong helps her to get back, but in doing so, he sacrifices the only means that he had of getting back himself. And he does that because he realizes that this girl being happy in future is more important than her remembering him.
Yeah.
And in doing that, he kind of fades away to nothingness. And it's so devastating.
Yeah, it's really brilliant. I mean, it is, and
it's brilliantly done, but it's like a proper punch in the stomach.
It's the way as well, like, it frames the different emotions. Like, you would think that in any simpler kids cartoon, the joy character would be everything, but actually it makes a commentary on that. It actually makes a commentary that actually she's a bit too domineering.
Yeah, you can't be happy all the time.
Exactly.
That kind of toxic positivity culture thing about everything's great and woo.
Yeah, because she tries to do that, doesn't she? She tries to do
that
to anxiety, you know. And it's like, it's actually, it comes across as like a slightly abusive, like gaslighting thing, you know. It's really clever. It's really beautifully done. I really liked the messages. It was complex, you know. It was complex for a kids film.
Pixar's very good at that, and it is there's a lot more to it than you think there is when you start thinking about it, and the stuff with Bing Bong is really powerful. That was
actually,
really...
guys, I do think that may be another podcast. Yeah.
What, Pixar?
I think we may have to dive deep into it could be Pixar, it could be like children's films and their relative complexity, you know.
You could just do bits that killed you on kids' films.
I think that'd be awesome. I think that'd be fantastic. But,
could do that.
As I think we've drawn to an almost natural close with this one, unless there's anything you guys want to add about the Child's Play films.
I'm gonna try and watch them.
Yeah, I think I am.
If you think it's worth it,
I think I'm gonna go. I'm definitely gonna go back and rewatch the first few now.
How many is there after the? Not counting the reboot.
Rebbie, I think there's either 5 or 6.
Yeah,
okay, that's not that bad.
That sounds about right.
They are worth watching, to be honest. Yeah. I've seen them all.
Oh, they're fun, you know.
Yeah, it's one of them things. Don't go in thinking that it's going to be something amazing because people big it up. You know, it's become a cult thing. It's one of my favourite things. So I talk about it like it's the best thing ever, and then people watch it and they're like, "What the hell is this?" so yeah, but
I think the time and place that you first saw 7. Okay,
7 films altogether, right?
I think time and place that you first watched something counts for a lot, though.
Yeah, definitely.
How old were you at the time? What was your mindset? Did you watch this in a cinema with a bunch of friends and it were really fun? And that makes a difference as opposed to just I were bored on a Sunday afternoon, so put it on Netflix.
Yeah, exactly.
Doing it that way is never going to give you the same impact as if you watched it at a particularly important time for you in terms of your development. Or if it was like
an event or something, you know. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I think that's very difficult when you're trying to pass films on to younger people. I've had that a few times with my partner Charlie, because she's about 10 years younger than me. So quite often there'll be a film that I watched growing up and this is amazing, it's the best thing ever, let's watch it together, and she'll watch it and be like, meh.
What were you thinking? Yeah. What's going on there? Yeah.
Sometimes it works. Like I watched the Lord of the Rings films with them and she got obsessed with them and she thinks they're brilliant. But sometimes there are things that she's just like, nah, I can't see why that's into it. And it's because I watched it in 1989 when I was a child, and but watching it now as an adult for the first time at 25, it just doesn't have any.
Work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. But I'm definitely going to go back and rewatch the first few again. 'Cause I haven't seen them for a long time at this point. A long time. But I'm surprised by how much of them sticks in my memory.
I will try. I'm pretty sure most of them's now on Netflix, to be honest.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I know for a fact the first one is a decent film. You know, it's not bad at all. And the second one's okay too. You know, the first three are not bad films at all. And the ones that come after are not bad films. They're just made... They're a different type of film completely.
Yeah, and if you know that going in, I think that's probably...
Yeah, as long as you know what you're going in for, as long as you're not expecting them to set the world alight and just have maybe a goofy laugh, you know, you'll probably get a lot out of them. But apart from that, they are significant. There's some of those films that are kind of in like horror canon at this point, aren't they? People know who Chucky is. They know what the good guy
that's a good point.
is.
He's one of them characters that, like Freddy and Jason, people know who he is without ever having watched one of the films.
They know exactly who Chucky is, and they even have some of the tropes in their head, you know, because of the cultural prevalence of it.
Yes.
But apart from that, guys, is there anything either of you would like to pimp out, by the way?
I have got my first short horror collection coming out at the end of this month. It's called Whistling Past the Graveyard, and it will be available in ebook and paperback. So from ebook it will be Amazon only, but if you want the paperback, you'll be able to get that from anywhere that you order your books from.
Brilliant. So we will be doing a full podcast about that, by the way, guys.
Yes.
So look out for that.
If Rebecca would like to come on that as well, then that would, if you want to come on that, Rebecca, that would help me out, because I'm always a bit awkward talking about my own books. So having another person on there would sort of help me feel like less of a prick talking about my own work.
Yeah, sure, that works for me. I haven't got anything of my own to pimp, but I will be covering like.
You have? What about your blog that you do?
I was going to say, we'll put links to your blog down below, definitely.
Yeah, that's fine. Like I'm saying, I'm just going to cover Lex's book that's coming up, and I've got obviously some other books coming up as well, but with that being a new release, I'm going to be doing that one on release day, and then I'm just covering more physical books in February, so it'll just be sort of, I'll probably put a lot more pictures out and stuff like that, so you can see the covers of those.
Superb. So guys, if you want to read Rebbie's blog about all things horror related, it's just down below. And also, and as per usual, there will be links to Lex's books, The Old One in the Sea and The Other Side of the Mirror, and whatever else is out there too. As for myself, it's the usual, guys. You can find me knocking about here on the Exaggerated Elegy channel, doing all sorts of things. Watch the Visage playthrough. It's scary as shit. It's so frightening. If you want to hear me legitimately scream, I'm deadly serious. Watch that playthrough. In fact, like the end of episode 2, I'm so freaked out by it. I'm like losing it. It's like, right, nope, I've had enough of this. Sorry, guys. No, it's that scary. It is really scary. Apart from that, you can find links to all of my published written fiction over at strangeplaygrounds.com. There's going to be the second volume of Born in Blood coming out via Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing in March. So keep an eye out for that one. It's a big old chunk. It's a big old chunk of really weird horror, that one. Apart from that, you can come and have a chat to me over at Twitter at Enigmatic Elegy if you fancy it. And thank you so much, guys, for coming on. That was a blast.
Thank you.
Absolute blast. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you both here again soon, yeah?
Yeah, sure.
Excellent.
Yeah, definitely.
Good stuff. And guys, thank you so much for listening, as per usual. Until next time, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.